your thoughts and your sentiments and the direction that you want to see out of this next LTP. On your desks in front of you, you should all have a copy of a couple of the slides, a couple of the key slides. So as we'll work through all of these and I'll talk through these, but as one way of providing feedback, if it's helpful, feel free to scribble notes against parts of that, and then we can collect those back later on if that's a useful way of hearing from you. In the interests of both time, but also so that you can get a complete picture of the framework, I just wonder if I run through all the slides and then maybe we have sort of a hearty discussion after that, and then we can come back to slides. We can navigate back to specific slides if we want to have a look at them again. So, into it. So first off, what I want to do is just run through what are the components of the strategic framework, and this will be a bit of a recap from where we were on the 15th, but it's just to kind of set the context again, just refresh your mind so that we can get back into this headspace. Also just conscious that a couple of the elected members were able to make it on that day. So our strategic framework is essentially made up of these components on this slide. We have our purpose, our purpose, which is set under the Local Government Act Section 10. You might recall from last time that we spoke about the fact that this is due to change soon. We're expecting this to change soon from its current definition in the Local Government Act. That might not make so much difference. The definition has changed and changed back again in the last 10 years, or last 15 years, and it didn't make a lot of difference to what councils actually do. But what we do want to do is make sure that our strategic framework, the way we frame our vision and our community outcomes, is a bit flexible to wherever that purpose lands. So whether it's a continuation of this one, or whether it's the next one, or whether it changes again, once we step into our vision and community outcomes, that needs to fit within that purpose, but at the end of the day, it's our expression, it's not government's expression. So long as we're flexible to where that legal definition lands, that's fine. The next part is the vision and community outcomes. So this is where we start to step into council space. These provide, at this level, a longer term kind of aspirational statements for council that we're working towards. It's that brighter future that we're aiming for. And at the last session, we talked about and acknowledged that we can hold aspirational vision statements and community outcomes, and we should. It doesn't mean that we can work at pace towards all those things, is where we arrived at the last session. There's always things that are ready to be progressed, and there's things that aren't. And there's resourcing and capacity considerations. And, there's wind in our sails sometimes, and sometimes there's not. So we can work at pace towards some of our aspirations, our visions, our community outcomes. Some things we can't. And that's where we start to look at strategic priorities. So right at the bottom of the table there, our strategic priorities are the things that we do choose to progress at this particular point in time. So the vision and community outcomes are those kind of longer term, aspirational, directional statements. Strategic priorities are those really more tangible things in our LTP that are the particular focus for this period, and especially for the first 3 years, but the LTP does run for 10 years. So that's what the strategic priorities are. So then just stepping one step back up to values there, pardon me again, the values are something that we've always held in our LTP, something that we always work through, but we haven't necessarily expressly articulated them previously. So what we'd like to do through this strategic direction framework round is actually tease out those elements of our community outcomes previously that were probably more value statements rather than community outcomes, and make sure that we're kind of clear about what those things are, and sit those alongside and weave through our community outcomes.
Can I just jump in? Well, sorry, I'm using my privilege here, but just to give an example for councillors perhaps that are newer to this process. So I know that in our last LTP, we did take quite a different approach in the early days, it was a less constrained approach, and councillors identified a lot of different things that were trying to be done. And that word trade-offs is really relevant to me, because I think what we're noticing in these early stages is that there will have to be some tough choices. But what we also noticed on reflection was that there were two items that sort of sat across everything that we did in our activity groups, and in the end, in the final version of the LTP 24, those two things sat kind of before we went into the specific activities, and they were Māori relationships and our approach to climate change. And so when we talk about sort of pulling out values, it's not so much the things that we will do, it's kind of the way that we would do it. And so we just think that's a really nuanced way of approaching it. So the values will kind of be the way that the things are delivered. I just wanted to kind of tease that out a bit. Thank you.
And so just rounding off this slide, the why, and that's really, I guess, overall it provides the direction for your LTP. It helps to guide those trade-offs that we do need to make and that prioritisation that we have to do. Especially in this LTP, where we've got a very constrained LTP that we're approaching, and so those trade-offs, having a framework, understanding what's most important to you, and using that framework to help make trade-offs is really important. There's elements of this that are required by legislation as well, but the more important factor here is having a good framework that can help guide your decision making as we work through the LTP. So I'll recap. Our last session on 15th of April, I'm just capturing here on this slide what we heard from you, and just wanted to play that back to you. So on the left-hand side of that slide there, we've got the 6 kind of key areas that you wanted to focus on through the LTP, and we've tried to be really deliberate about how we thread those through the strategic framework to make sure that it does reflect those things that are most important. In terms of efficiency and cost, at the last session we heard from Lawrence Yule about rates capping and how deep the impact of that could actually be for councils. And we heard from you, I think, that this really needs to be very front and centre of this LTP. Part of that's about, once we get to that strategic priorities part, the things that we're progressing through this LTP, that there was a desire for those to be narrower and more focused. So other key areas that you shared, and we'll come to these a bit later, were housing, Three Waters, Rex Morpeth Hub, resilience and emergency management, and organisational culture. So we'll come back to these on another slide. On the right-hand side there, we also had a bit of a brainstorming exercise towards the end of that session. So on the left-hand side, those things that I've already covered, they were sort of the forward-facing, this is what you're expecting from this next LTP, the key things you want to see. On the right-hand side of the slide there, that was a bit of a looking backwards to our existing strategic framework. We had a look at the components that sat within our strategic framework that was developed for the last LTP in 2024, and got some of your reflections on that. So having a look at the things that we wanted to keep, the things that we maybe needed to refresh and change, and some thoughts were shared on the side there about what we heard, or some of the key things we heard. So just to run through a few of those key things, we heard that the vision and community outcome level, at that aspirational level, most of those things were still largely relevant, but there was a lot of overlap between the long-term aspirations and the strategic priorities. One of the key things we heard was that the strategic priorities were too broad. This wasn't the time for broad strategic priorities, and that there was a keenness for those to be more focused and therefore be more useful for prioritisation through your LTP process. Some of our community outcomes, as we've already discussed, are more like values. And then there were a number of comments as well around ways of working with community and in partnership. That was actually on a number of post-it notes came through, and that there was opportunity within that. So we've thought about this, and we've looked at how we should approach redeveloping your strategic framework, how much it needs to change, and then also started to work on it and make those changes reflected into it. Oh, this one. Oop. There we go. So just really quickly, firstly, in terms of an approach, we just had a look at some high-level options. How should we go forward in terms of the level of change we're looking at? and we had a look at kind of 3 broad options for how to go forward. One, and this is the suggested approach, and the one that we've just started to actually work forward on, is to refresh the existing framework. We think that, in terms of the contextual changes we've seen and the fact that a lot of our current framework, is still valid, that refreshing it and updating it is probably the best way forward. It's practical as well. It's practical and efficient, and it allows us to kind of, pick up on some of those sentiments you've shared and bring them to life. We've had a look at keeping the current framework. That's always an option, but really it wouldn't reflect the feedback that you've provided back to us. In particular, wanting to see narrower strategic priorities that just will help you make decisions in that constrained environment. And then finally, developing a brand new framework. This is quite resource intensive, so we're not suggesting going that way. Really, if we're going down that route, it's something that you'd want to do with a lot of community participation. So I wouldn't suggest at this point in time necessarily.
Could you just repeat that you don't want to go down to reinventing it because of? I didn't quite hear that.
Two things. One, because I think we can take a far more practical and efficient approach by doing a lighter refresh. If we go down a process of doing a full redevelopment, it's quite a resource-intensive project and requires quite substantial community consultation. I think there will be a time that we need it, and that time will come soon. There's a lot of change happening. That change hasn't landed yet, and when that change happens, that's probably a good time to look at a full redevelopment of our framework. Right, so actually moving into what a refreshed framework could look like. So this is one of the slides on your table, in case the text is a little small on the screen there. It is for me. Let's have a nosy. So we've started to conceptualise a framework on this slide. So down the right-hand side of that model, you can see some call-outs there that are those concepts, or those components rather, that I spoke about earlier in this session. So you've got your vision statement at the top. Each of these components, by the way, I'll cover in the next slides. So we've got a vision statement at the top, where we're not suggesting any change. We've got our community outcomes and our values in the middle there that sit at the same level, and we're proposing to refresh those in line with what we heard from you at the last session, and introducing those values down the left there in the tan. So the green are the community outcomes, and the tan ones down the side being the values. So not necessarily new to our framework, a new component to our framework, but sentiments that should look and sound familiar. It's just that they're restructured in a different way, for the most part. Then the blue circles at the bottom are the strategic priorities in terms of what we progress for the community, which are part of those 6 that we heard from you. And then I've added in the bottom there, it's not really part of the strategic framework, but I've added in the bottom there to have visibility of our established levels of service. And I've done that for 2 reasons, or 3 reasons really. The first is that our established levels of service commitments is the majority of what we do. So I just really wanted to sit those alongside your 4 strategic priority areas for delivery, because alongside those, that's what we're delivering to the community. And the vast majority of what we do are in that those established levels of service.
So the 4 priorities are the ones down on the left-hand side, the efficiency, strong partnership, etc.
Sorry, the light blue circles. The light blue circles at the bottom are the strategic.
Are our priorities?
Yep. So
wouldn't the priorities be efficiency, cost, right sizing, and trade-offs, and strong partnerships, etc.?
So that's if I can distinguish between those a little bit. So those 6 key focus areas that you shared with us at the last session, 2 of those sit in the values. So you've got on the top left there efficiency, cost, right sizing, and trade-offs there, and There was another one around, organisational culture. Thank you, Sarah. And that's also been included as a value. So that's something that weaves through everything we do. If we're a fit-for-purpose organisation, that enables us to deliver what we need to for the community. We're just trying to differentiate here between those two things and the 4 strategic priorities which deliver to the community. Those other 2 are about how we work across everything. Those 4 are about delivering specific things to the community. They're all...
I've got Tony again.
You've been asking questions.
Okay.
Should we wait till
just coming back to those established levels of service, the two other reasons that I've added that, and one is that alongside those strategic priorities, they deliver on our community outcomes. So together, it's not just our strategic priorities that deliver on our community outcomes, it's those established levels of service commitments as well. And thirdly, because there might be some element of trade-offs. So just thinking back to what Lawrence Yule shared with us, we're going to be in a very constrained LTP, and that means there's going to have to be trade-offs somewhere. And so those trade-offs might be, look, if you want to pull the lever harder for some of your strategic priorities, that means you might need to pull back on some of the other things we deliver, for example. And that's talking directly, I guess, to that cost and efficiency constraint. Right, so first off, at the top of that framework was our vision. We're not intending to change this, or not proposing to change this. It's largely, still relevant, still current. And I've just shared there that when this was developed, there was some very intentional meaning in all of the words that were in that vision. We did hear that we want to put some te reo across our vision, but actually across all of our framework, really. But so we're not intending that this part should change. Oh, that's a double up of the slide. So community outcomes are the next part of the framework. Community outcomes next to values, and we'll cover those over these next 2 slides. The community outcomes, so we've redrafted these to align with some of the feedback that we've heard. They essentially cover much of the same ground that our previous community outcomes did. There's a bit more of an infrastructure focus in there, and that leans a little bit more into the new purpose statement of local government. But otherwise, they largely cover the same ground. And so just to give you a chance to take those in, and on the slide, I might just read them out. So the first one, safe, inclusive and thriving communities. Whakatane District is a place where people feel safe, connected and supported, with vibrant towns and rural communities that enable everyone to participate, belong and live well. So these statements, by the way, these are all about Whakatane District, about communities, and you'll see once we move to the values, they're all sort of council-oriented statements. We'll come to those on the next slide. So the second one, protected and valued natural and cultural heritage. Whakatane District's natural environment, cultural identity and heritage shape a strong sense of place, belonging and identity. Our land, water, coast, biodiversity and cultural and historic heritage are protected and cared for through stewardship, kaitiakitanga and shared responsibility for current and future generations. Next one, resilient infrastructure and connected places. Whakatane District's people, places and infrastructure are resilient, well-connected and adaptable, supporting safe, accessible and sustainable communities that can thrive through climate change, natural hazards and future growth. And then finally, prosperous, forward-looking economy. Whakatane has a diverse, resilient local economy that supports meaningful employment, innovation and sustainable growth while celebrating local identity and opportunity across urban and rural areas. So as I said, these are all working statements. So we're looking for any thoughts or feedback that you have across, well, any parts of the framework. Supporting community outcomes with these interpretation statements is new. We haven't done that previously. So it is a first go, and we're happy for any feedback that you have on that. Moving to our values, which sit alongside.
So in terms of giving feedback, so will we do that at the end, like go through them all and then give feedback?
If it feels natural to provide it as it goes, we could take that approach. I think we're getting to the kind of the meat of the framework now. So if it makes sense to give the feedback, that could be useful. Yeah.
So do councillors want to in terms of, we're just at this community outcomes, do we want to pause for a second, have a discussion or have some input into those community outcomes now? So I think if we go through, as we go through each part of this, we'll pause and have questions and input on each part, because otherwise we'll get to the end. And so we've looked at the more life in life, and I don't know if anyone's got any comments about that, but then moving to the community outcomes, we'll just pause for a moment and get some input into that before we move on to the values.
Questions on everything parts prior to this.
Let's ask questions on the vision, because we skipped over that, and then the community outcomes, and then we'll move to the other parts and go through those bit by bit. Leslie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. This prosperous, forward-looking economy, besides compliance stuff, there's, from a reality check point of view, there's not much that council can do except support businesses who want to grow. And I'm interested to see if you were going to break down some of this prosperous, long-term, forward economy, what some of those actions might be aside from compliance. Because we've had key businessmen want to do things in town, and sometimes they found a bit hamstrung. So we're actually going to put some actions along this, and it's almost one of the hardest things to measure, because you're actually investing in a person or a business. So, it wasn't part of that discussion, but when you were discussing it, what were some of the actions you thought might come out of it? I don't know really who that question's to. Steve?
Actually, there's a lot more councils can do than compliance, but I think what you're doing is you're reflecting on what the council has done, which has been largely, I think, around compliance. In order to stimulate and support growth, councils have a major role. I was going to talk about it a little bit later, actually, in ensuring that there is land available for businesses, much like there should be land available for housing. There needs to be land available for businesses, because businesses create jobs. So council has a role in that, and that can be very proactive. Plus there's also policies. So councils can have investment attraction policies. Currently we don't. But that's something that we've been talking about bringing up alongside the growth strategy work. So sitting alongside, if you do a district plan that is starting to open up land, then in order to incentivise investment around economies and business, then you might have a portfolio of policies that support that as well, that are all about investment attraction. Then there is that sort of softer stuff, sort of more traditionally in the economic development area, which is, supporting, connecting businesses together, doing those sponsorships, training capability programs, setting up innovation hubs, all of that sort of stuff in the economic development space. So there are proactive things that councils can do.
Which is where this is going to sit in there, rather than being a bit more reactive.
I feel like that's the current course of direction of council. Yeah, and in particular, I was going to talk about it under the priorities because I noticed there's housing sitting there, but maybe I'll talk about that later. But yeah, I think absolutely there's more proactive stuff council can
Thank
do.
you.
Lainey, you had something to
Thank you. I'd like to just support what Steve said and respond to the question in a slightly different way as well, in terms of if you think about a strategy as sort of an inverse triangle, and the top being the most aspirational, generic kind of statement around that purpose and vision, and then the next tier or level being this outcomes piece. That is where you are essentially saying what you hope will be achieved, but as you go further down into the strategic priorities, that is where that's really driving the action and the tangible, specific actions that you as a council will take. So when you go back up the triangle, all of the work programs and action plans should tie into the priority areas, which we'll come to, and the hope then is that they then enable these. So I just thought that might help in terms of how you're seeing the different levels as we work through them, because this needs to reflect your hopes and ambitions for the district and the communities. And then when we get to those priority areas, as Steve said, that's where you can actually really drive the actions that you will take to enable these.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Morena tātou. I just had two thoughts. One was on the prosperous, forward-looking local economy, sort of echoing Councillor Imink's comments. We haven't got any specific mention of tourism. I know it's implied through innovation and also through employment, but bearing in mind we do have a tourism team, does that need to be explicitly articulated in our outcomes if that is a focus for council? So that's my first question. And my second question was going back to the our overarching vision, working together to make living better. When we say working together, is that it's implied that's working with our community? I'm guessing, rather than working internally as a council. In which case I wondered if we could rephrase that to be working together with our communities to make living better. Like that.
Personally, I don't think actually specifically tourism needs to be referenced in an outcome. I think in this current model, it's probably sitting as a BAU activity. That's how it's been perceived because it's been quite a long-standing activity. So it has become business as usual. So then that would get reflected. I mean, and this is a shift away from that sort of broader strategic priorities into narrower ones. When you're coming to do the LTP and you're looking at activity management plans, you're sort of starting to weigh up their role in terms of, is it a priority or is it a BAU activity, and how should we make investment decisions around those? So I think things like actual activities probably sit down on that level rather than up in the outcomes. And then the second question. What was the second question?
Just to be more explicit that it's working with our communities, because I think sometimes it can be a bit confusing. Is this a vision statement for our community or is it an internal statement? And just making that clear.
I've got a good example of that if you'd like it. Last week we had the community reference group with the Awakiri community and we talked a lot about the growth strategy. So if you look at this image, the outcomes that we've just been talking about in terms of prosperous forward local community, but the priority areas would be where the local growth strategy really comes into effect. And so obviously housing is one element of that, but that's definitely community informed and that's where we see that kind of interaction most, is coming into effect most of all. So yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Tony?
Kia ora. I just wanted to ask, with the outcomes, where are Māori and iwi and hapu?
Intercultural.
Kia ora. Yes. So in our previous framework, there was a community outcome that was specifically around partnerships with Māori.
Yes.
So what's happened with that community outcome is essentially there's two different sentiments that are drawn from that and now expressed in two different places within the framework. One is an outcome that's intending, to be one of those longer term aspirations, so it sits in that cultural and natural heritage space. And the other one is the relationship element, which is a value that weaves through everything, that partnerships and relationships element, and that's the second value down the left-hand side. So we haven't come to that on the next slide yet, but that one's been shifted into the value statement.
I guess I'm not allowed to comment on that, but I have serious concerns regarding not specifically linking our mana whenua and iwi relationships, because the outcomes directly relate to investment of those priorities. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Tony. And I think the post-it notes that you guys left in our first session, where you talked about going from relationships with Māori, strengthening relationships, to that partnering, co-investment. It is here, but maybe it's a language thing, because you're right, to Carolyn's point as well, talking about communities, working with communities. I know that the work they've done is prioritising iwi and hapu and partnerships and co-investment. So would a sort of change in language support that? I know that the thinking behind is working with iwi and hapu in that space.
I just wanted clarity, because it was really clear in our last LTP that the outcomes and statements themselves directly related to the investment of what those priorities were. And it's harder to see that here, because cultural can be anybody's cultural. It can be the opera, it can be dancing. So it doesn't specifically connect to our iwi.
Yep.
So for me, it's having a value statement with Māori there is great, but it feels like lip service. Thank you.
Cool. I can say that it's not just the work that the team have been doing behind the scenes. It's definitely not. So I would put it down to maybe just a sort of language issue in terms of how it's being presented.
Steve?
Yeah, I was looking at that one as well, and I did have a suggestion for the table. I mean, our current community outcomes talk to constructively and collaboratively engaging with iwi. So really, it's only at engaging. But actually, I think at the time that was important, because we were engaging, but actually our relationships have moved to a different point. So I think there is, to Councillor Boynton's point, something in the language. And I also looked at the current one, and for me, the word heritage just makes me look backwards. And I wondered, even if you dropped that and you sort of had just protected and valued nature and culture, that starts to sort of shift actually what outcome you're talking about, and how you might be sort of heading towards that. So maybe just dropping the word heritage was a thought. I don't know if that helps or not.
Julie?
Thank you. I was just going back to what Carolyn said. I just wondered, and I was just trying to rack my brain, that we might have put just working together because it was actually wider than just the community. Like we might be working with external developers from, Tauranga or something like that. It wasn't just working together with the community. It was actually a bit broader than just the community, which was why I think we ended up leaving it out of there. But I am going back a few years, so I'm not sure where we landed, whether it was we were going to add it or not. But I've just got that feeling that it was working together wider than just our community. But whether a better wording might be put in there, I'm not sure.
Kevin?
Just two things. The slide that's up there now, where you've got housing on the left, that actually, I actually wonder if it's wordsmithing needs to happen there. But what I wonder if, and also with Councillor Emmek's one, is why don't we have housing and growth enablement? Because it's what we're doing in Awakiri, we're enabling an atmosphere or environment where people want to build subdivisions and things like that, but we're actually not building them ourselves. And it's the same with the growth. We want to enable or make it easier for industries and other things and subdivisions to come in and do it. So I would like the word enablement in there. And in your community outcomes, I just, like I was listening to something on the radio that in the budget, the government might throw more stuff down on us. So where's the affordability in all this? That as a result of the LTP, it's more affordable for people to live in our district. And I know growth is part of that, and housing and all that. But if we do all this pretty stuff, and excuse my language, it's just me, if we do all this pretty stuff, and people can't afford to live here with our high rates and all that, and lack of jobs, then we might as well all go home. You know, it's like housing and growth enablement, and somewhere in there needs to be affordability.
Through the chair, just to answer, I think this will be intrinsically linked through to the financial strategy, and one of the big components of that will be about affordability combined with prudent investment and a balance, which we'll cover off shortly.
But the word housing gives the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Leslie?
Thank you. Now that we're going to talk a little bit about finances, we recognise that we do need more housing in the district, but is more housing in the district going to increase enough rates revenue for us to make it worth it? So we've heard that we need about 120 new houses every year for 10 years. So that's only about, if you have an average rate of about 5,000, that's only $600,000 extra revenue. That could just cost us a consultant for 2 years. So I know that we're talking about growth, but are we like running the numbers on its actually return on investment for us?
We've got a slide. Okay.
Just a key point to remember there that new houses don't create revenue. It just gives you more houses to split your costs across. So what it does is actually, as you increase the number of housing stock, theoretically your rates should be increasing at a slower rate because you're able to divide your costs across more houses. So it doesn't create revenue. And then the other thing with growth that you talked about there is, if there is a population increase, and your district planning function needs to be thinking about how we're ensuring that there is sufficient housing and jobs. In particular with housing, if you start playing with the demand-supply equation, then you get into a situation where it may artificially accelerate the cost of housing if you're not keeping pace and there's a perceived shortage. So there's two things there. Yeah. First of all, it's not rates revenue, it's just more houses or more units to split the cost of running a council across. And the second part is keeping pace with population growth, just to ensure that you're not distorting the market.
I think there is a slide on the approach to housing when we come to the priority areas through the presentation. So the team will kind of explain the distinction between the outcomes and then the values and priority areas as we go. So if it's all right to save that one until we get to the housing part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Tony?
There's a question, similar question regarding the strategic priorities. When we had that wānanga, majority of the post-it notes and that all said about how we work in collaboration with iwi and that. So I want to know where in the strategic priorities can I see that as an outcome, where investment is going to go?
Okay, and I'll just try, but we will be going to the strategic priorities in a moment. But in terms of what I think the question is, it's the intent and the sentiment around working with iwi, hapu and whānau that came through in the thinking that you did in that earlier wānanga is captured as a value, because that is the way in which all council activities will be carried out. The strategic priorities are the things that we will do, so the activities. It's really difficult to capture our overall approach to working with Māori in a focused priority investment area, because actually it will be in everything that we do. We will be investing in everything with that in mind.
Thank you. I guess, yes, that's what I was wanting to see, because we did specifically have it as an invested outcome in our last LTP, so it could be seen and the activities have been produced. So I guess I'm just trying to see, where is that?
And what we learned in the last LTP, that by having it in the priority area, but it not actually being a focused activity that we could directly see investment and then return on that investment, that actually became problematic because it wasn't tangible enough. And that is why we've quite deliberately pulled it out into a value that will infuse everything that we do.
So we will see investment in maintaining the strategic relationships team?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, another example of that is our, our commitment to climate change and resilience is seen more as a value because it spans the whole organisation. Yeah.
I'll just remind people, just we're not dropping down into those priorities yet. We're yet to get to that. So, Wilson.
Yeah, I think the thing we've got to keep in mind is if we're not growing, we're going to be going backwards, which then that makes our rates less affordable again. So we've got to keep moving forward. I don't believe people move away from here because the rates are too expensive and that. If they do, housing values will drop and then that brings in a new cycle of people. So I don't think that's a real issue. I think we have got to keep forging ahead and improving things for the betterment of everyone.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got a couple of comments, some of them in response to, and then a couple of my own. One was to Carolyn's point about the working together. I like, because it's that high level vision, I kind of quite like the ambiguity in a way, and because it's like working together, well, what do we mean by that? Well, don't we mean everyone, so I don't mind that, but I do think that the point that I think you're making around somewhere in here being quite explicit about how we partner with communities, I'm not sure, and I may have missed it, I'm not sure. I mean, you've got strong partnerships and mana enhancing relationships, so perhaps it's implicit in there, but I would like to see something explicit that we have a priority around somewhere, that working with communities is something we think is really important as an organisation. We're oriented to that. Similarly, in terms of the issues that Tony's raised about relationships with Māori, I mean, I do think having it in the values is the right place to have it, because what we're saying, it's not a one project that we're talking about. It's actually what we want as an organisation where everything we do, we're actually engaging with tangata whenua well. And so I think it's the values is the right place. Maybe we could enhance the wording a little bit to talk about investing in strong partnerships and enhancing relationships. I'm not sure, I don't have an answer to that, and I don't want to wordsmith it around the table, but I think making sure that that's really, again, really explicit and clear in those values. But I think that is the right place to put it. The point about Gavin raised about the cost and efficiency, and I think that's quite right. We've all said that this is a clear priority for us. And I do think probably it's currently located in the strategic priorities. I don't want to drop down too far into that, but it is located in strategic priorities. Cost and efficiency is a really clear priority for us, and I think that's right. I think we've collectively agreed that we want that to be a priority. So I think that's there. I was just going to come back to the community outcomes. I had two comments there. Resilient infrastructure and connected places. I mean, I think they're roughly in the right place. I'm not sure, in resilient infrastructure and connected places, it talks about supporting safe, accessible and sustainable communities. I'm not sure what a sustainable community is. What are we trying to say with sustainable communities? I'm not clear. It feels like a buzzword's been chucked in there and doesn't. So I think that probably needs a different word. And where it talks about future growth, there's a couple of things. Communities that can thrive in the face of climate change, natural hazards and future growth. One is, personally, I would quite like to see a statement there around economic instability, because one of the biggest challenges we face as a community is global economic pressure, and so I think we could probably articulate that. The other one is future growth. We talk about future growth, and I agree with Wilson, if we're not growing, we're drowning. But also, we have to acknowledge that if this is a long-term, if these are long-term community outcomes, then maybe we should phrase that in terms of changing population or changing demographics or something, because it recognises that there may be different things going on, but we need to be in a place where we can handle those things. And then in terms of prosperous, forward-looking economy, meaningful employment, innovation and sustainable growth. Personally, I much prefer the terms development rather than growth. Growth just means getting bigger. Development has a more complexity because it's around a more diverse economy rather than just a bigger economy. Prefer the word development than growth in all of our stuff, actually. And then the other thing is what we've lost in there is something, and there's a post-it note, people weren't sure about using the term green, and I get that. I like it myself, but I understand it's not for everyone. But I do think something around, because we don't just want we can have a diverse, resilient local economy that's still really exploitative. And so I would like to see a term in there that somehow captures the idea of I'm not quite sure, an economy that has ecological integrity, or I don't know, that's not the right word, but something that captures that we want a economy that's fit for the 21st century and all the challenges we face. So that's my feedback. And if there's nothing else on that, should we move on to values? We've kind of talked a bit about values, but if there's further to add to values. Or did you want to go, you didn't talk through that, did you? Do you want to?
We were just due to arrive on that one, and thank you so much for the conversation so far. I think it's really useful, and I think this is exactly kind of, what we need to do today. The values are intended to sit at the same level as the community outcome statements, so they're equally areas that we invest into. Values being, as has been mentioned a number of times, things that weave through the all, and the outcomes being more about kind of specific areas that we're aspiring to achieve and work towards. So they work together and sit at the same level. The values that we've got at the moment there that we've drafted up are efficiency, right sizing and trade-off. So this is that cost and efficiency space. Whakatane District Council makes deliberate, balanced decisions that optimise resources, align services to community needs, and carefully navigate trade-offs while maintaining a clear focus on long-term implications. Strong partnerships and mana-enhancing relationships. Whakatane District Council embraces trusted, inclusive and responsive partnerships with iwi, hapu whānau, local communities and organisations working together to shape decisions and take action. Taking a sustainable long-term view, Whakatane District Council takes a thoughtful and future-focused approach to sustainability, recognising the interconnectedness of nature and social environments. We make balanced decisions that respond to the needs of today while carefully considering long-term outcomes for future generations. And then fit for future organisation focused on continuous improvement. Whakatane District Council is a strong, resilient, well-led organisation that works collaboratively, uses resources wisely and continuously improves, enabling the effective delivery of services and outcomes that support communities now and into the future.
Leslie?
Thank you. I think just the sustainable long-term view, I agree with the Mayor actually, and to change that future-focused approach to development, recognising interconnectedness of nature, natural and social. I think that probably reads better than sustainability, which can be a bit ambiguous. Oh, gosh. Ambiguous. And the other comment I have is between efficiency and fit for purpose, like I know this is the values, it's not an outcome, but if you're an outsider looking in at the values, it feels like there's almost too high a priority on the fit for purpose of the organisation. Like if you were going to allocate a budget to those things, which they're not outcomes, it just, for me, it just say, yes, we want to have an efficient working force for the community in the future, but I'm just wondering how it weighs on our values. So it's just really posing a question, thinking about it.
Other comments or questions? Tony?
Just on the same one again too, because for me that feels weird. It's like, what's your values? It's like, oh, trade-offs. But it's sort of like that, yeah, how that's worded or how that's put forward. The kupu trade-offs, sort of, I don't know whether that's about and opportunities being more, not so much as like, oh, we're going to get rid of this or get rid of that. I don't know. The trade-off word itself feels, it's got more of a negative tone and being right up the top, that our values are efficiency and right-sizing are okay, but it's that whole thing of that. That's our first value, is looking at that, and the word trade-off being the lead before we get to mana enhancing and stuff like that. So I know that they'll probably sit all alongside each other, but it's just that, I know for me the trade-off word has a negative connotation. If it was something to be like exchange or opportunity or something that has more of a positive. Thank you.
That's really helpful feedback, and obviously the layout of these is really important because this is the message you send your community. So absolutely you want your community to kind of understand how you're balancing and weighing up these elements that guide your LTP. And I think there is an opportunity to look at how those are presented. In terms of trade-offs, I think that's the promise you're making. You've heard very, very clearly through the last LTP and more recently that your community is expecting council to make really tough calls and to make trade-offs. And so I think that's why the team has it there, is that this is the promise that you're then making to them.
Yeah.
I would have thought the word, to me, trade-offs is almost a slang word, and therefore a value statement. It's almost like balanced decisions would actually work better there. That actually sounds more professional.
And I've got a smile on my face because for that particular title, it's the one where I really didn't land. I had put some sentiments down that tried to share the thought, but just hadn't quite landed on.
But balanced decisions actually tell you, like, I agree with what my fellow councillors are saying, although I like affordability. You actually have to have growth to be affordable, and so that's where your balance comes in. So, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor.
Carolyn?
Thank you. I think that it's really helpful to go through the values quite carefully, but I just want to echo Tony's comments about having mana enhancing perhaps as first in our values list, but also sitting it alongside why we're doing that, because we're weaving it in. To me, values comes above our community outcomes. And so if we'd had that above it, then I think that would have referenced our relationship with iwi hapu right at the start, and then that flows into the community outcomes.
Yeah, I agree with that comment. And I think it's quite right that, I mean, I quite liked the way this was attempted to be represented as a kind of raranga, but it didn't quite work. It wasn't quite clear to me, and don't have any suggestion, but I think it could be done. I think it's a really good idea, but it's just doesn't quite work at the moment.
It's a policy analyst's approach at graphic design.
In the short time frame.
And I mean, I'm not even sure how that will be articulated, but we're calling them values, but I'm wondering whether even just saying how we do things or something like even more plainly, because certainly I get tangled up in what these words kind of mean, because they're these buzzwords, we all do these things. So what are we actually trying to say here? I agree with putting the relationship stuff at the top. Agree that the heading of that, efficiency, right sizing and Travis, I thought that was a good suggestion from Gavin, I think it was. Thank you for that. The picking up Carolyn's earlier point around how we work with community, I guess that's in that relationship stuff, so making sure that's really clear. I didn't like the fit for purpose organisation as well. That was also language that I thought wasn't right for the heading. Again, I don't have an alternative. But the point that we're trying to make the council a really well functioning machine, I think, is something about how we do things. And then and then on the takes a sustainable long-term view, I wondered whether in that last sentence we make balanced decisions that respond to the needs of today while carefully considering long-term outcomes and future generations. I'm wondering whether there could be something in there that, again, a bit more talks about kind of a regenerative approach. Because Steve said earlier about the cultural and natural values that is kind of backward looking. I think that's right. And one thing that I would like to see us as an organisation is actually be regenerative in how we do things. So so for me, the classic example is thinking about our stormwater system where we're moving towards a more biophilic approach, open drains, that we have an ecosystem in it and stuff like that rather than closed concrete pipes. So to me, that's a regenerative approach. So something in the language that kind of captures that it's not just looking after the environment, it's actually actively restoring ecosystems where we can.
Before we move away from this section, can I just check in terms of what happens next? The team are going to take away your feedback, and obviously we've got more to come, and then bring back to you what they believe will be essentially a finished framework that everyone is ready to jump into, and it reflects their views. So obviously we've heard some things here, and there was a suggestion just then around the levels and presentation of what the community outcomes look like for the community as a whole in the district, and the values, which are kind of the things that you and staff will bring to the approach to delivering on those outcomes. Our intention is to mesh those together in some clever graphical way that represents both the what and the how. And at the moment, whether we actually put the label value on or how we do it, I think that's what we're intending to bring back. So I just want to check in. We've heard some really detailed feedback, but also there are people that haven't commented on these particular things. So we want to make sure that what we bring back to you does actually reflect the whole of council. Are you comfortable that if we move away from values now, that the team has enough direction to do that?
Andrew?
I want to take up on the point that Gavin raised with regards to affordability. I think that has to be emphasised. So how that gets threaded through, I'm not quite sure, but just taking on board the changing world trend sort of thing, how it's going to impact. I see later on in our strategic priorities with the cost and efficiencies, could we somehow bring affordability into that? Because it is, right before us all.
Because the affordability is kind of why we're doing it in a way. So just being explicit about we're actually trying to make it.
Yeah, and that we are, thoughtful of the high deprivation and the cost of living ratio sort of thing.
All right. Thank you, Councillor. Julie?
What about adding it cost efficiency and affordability? Because, I have moved on to strategic. I just had, I know we're not talking about them yet, but I was just trying to say maybe that would be the place we could put it, because most of the bullet points under there, you are talking about affordability, but it could be in the heading there, cost efficiency and affordability, maybe.
Cool, thank you. Leslie?
Yes, but isn't that, there's a reality that we all know affordability is different things to different people, and if by making that a headline, it puts us under the pump to achieve it. I mean, I know that we're always trying to be as considerate from an affordability point of view.
But affordability is so general a term anyway that, I mean, it's hard to put an actual definition on it, so I don't know that we'd be limiting ourselves if it wasn't a heading, but I mean, it was just a suggestion. I'm not going to die in a ditch on it.
True.
I quite like it myself, I think, because what we're saying is affordability is a priority for us. We may or may not reach it, and as you say, people will interpret it in different ways, but we're signalling to the community that we're taking these concerns seriously, which we've heard.
And that we're responding to, i.e. fuel prices, which is mentioned here again.
Yeah.
What else is around the corner?
Yeah. Malcolm?
Thank you. I have a question, and this is very comprehensive from my point of view, and it means that we're actually committing ourselves to making a lot of statements. Do we get challenged by the community if we're not able to live up to some of these statements? Can they come along and say, hey, you guys have got this in your mission statement, but it's not happening? Like, if you've got a developer that comes along and says, I've been trying to develop this land, but, I'm having problems here. So where does that lie with so much information there?
I'll have a go, but Steve might put me right if I go off track. One thing that we as a team really felt very acutely in the last LTP was that, and it was my first LTP, to be fair, so I didn't have a lot to compare it with, but what I noticed as we progressed towards the end was that the council really took it on and owned it and went out into the community and said, this is what we want to do, what do you think? And they absolutely did get challenged. Before it was adopted, there were lots of very robust conversations about the rates rises, but also the priority areas and so on. And then in the aftermath, we had quite a lot of scrutiny over the actual budget itself, but also over the kind of intent and underpinning it. And to their credit, council actually really stepped in and kind of shouldered a lot of that. So I think, yes, we do get challenged, or council gets challenged after it commits to whatever priorities it decides it wants to endorse, and we see that in the Beacon almost weekly, not necessarily specifically, you said and now you're not, But I think there is a healthy discourse in terms of making those what I call promises and then being held to account.
Can I just say, that often comes, something that you raise often, Leslie, is around the targets that we set and that some, whether they're ambitious enough or are we setting targets that are easy to reach. I think it's an important thing because I think what we're doing here is at a high level, we're setting quite ambitious targets. We're saying we want to be, we're trying to be more affordable. We're trying to make sure that there's adequate housing. We're setting these things and we will be challenged on them, you're quite right. But that's our community holding us to account for the things that we say that we plan to deliver. And we won't always 100% hit everything, but this is our intent. We're setting out, this is what we're trying to do. And I think it's important because otherwise, what are we trying to do? This is where we state it. Yeah.
Just as an example, now regional council, when I first was on that, their main statement was about sustainability. That's about all they had. Very, very small, very short and precise. But I do understand LTPs have changed over the years and we've got all these community outcomes. The other thing is, with the change in the RMA and the new laws that are going to come through, we're doing a lot of work. Will we need to change some of a lot of what we're doing to accommodate that? It's great to have these aspirations, as I've said, but being able to deliver on them and be held accountable could be a problem in the future on some of them.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Thank you, Councillor. Leslie?
Just to respond to Malcolm as well, like when we deliberate or we go out to consult on the LTP, we know there's things in there already that we personally might not agree with, but if council doesn't do it and do the future setting, who does? And I think one of the valuable things that I've learned over the last couple of LTPs, as long as you go out there with a team approach, like being able to, if we have 3 or 4 councillors on each little ward going out to all of those community meetings or the business community, we actually can bounce off each other because we all hear things differently. And if I had a question and I couldn't answer it, and Wilson or Andrew was there, I would say, you know what, let me just go and check to see what Wilson thought about that. And similarly, we're there to support staff and management. Like often we get portrayed as a them and a us, and there's times that we disagree with each other. But if we actually go out as a bit of a united front, when you're going face to face with people, they actually sometimes just don't understand, and we can explain the rationale for a decision. They might not agree with you, but they can actually walk away thinking, oh, well, that sucks, but that was a good conversation I had with Tony, and I think that's what we learned, particularly in the last round of consultation, is that if we go out there as a team, and you can say to people, I actually, personally, I'm not quite across all of that, or I didn't really agree with it. But if we're thinking long term, if you keep people thinking about an alignment to the future, like how you get there might change. But the staff are also ratepayers, and they also want to live in our community and make it a better place. And sometimes we just need to remind the community that as well. They're not just there to rip everyone off and sting them.
Thank you. So I think that's seems like we're there with the values and everything. Everyone's had a say. Tony, did you?
No, it's all right. I still have, I'm still uncomfortable. I know that, mana enhancing relationships and values, but I am used to seeing values, outcomes and priorities having a very clear link to themselves so that they can be seen, that they're actually seen in those things. And at the moment, for me, we've got these values, but I don't see the direct thing like, boom, housing, boom, this other thing, and then they aren't in there. So That's just me. But I'm not seeing what I'm used to seeing, which is a very clear, you can identify the rārana going from one to the next, to the next, to the next. So that's just me.
Thank you, Councillor. I think staff have heard that comment and we'll be looking at how to make that really explicit. Thank you. Shall we move on? So just to say, it's just gone 9:15. When do we need to leave to be in Kawerau in time? Need to leave at 10, okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so let's whiz through.
Thank you. So this was, I guess, the last content slide, and I just wanted to test if you were comfortable that we've provided the feedback that you want to provide on your strategic priorities as well. This is the narrow part. This is where the rubber hits the road in terms of the feedback that you want to be narrow with those specific areas that you're looking to increase your focus and potentially increase your investment in the next LTP. So these are those areas. The 6 items in the circles are those that you have provided to us in the last workshop and were subject, were the outcome of a workshop that you've had earlier in the year, a facilitated workshop. What we've done underneath those is provide some bullet points trying to interpret what we think they mean. And so I guess it's the test of whether, are those bullet points correct? Do they provide a narrow enough view? Funneling down from that kind of longer term view, the longer term aspirational into this LTP, what are the key areas you want to focus on? I guess A, is it narrow enough? And B, do those bullet points reflect what you were saying when you shared those 6 items?
Julie.
So first dumb question. So on page 17, you've got what a refreshed framework could look like, and you've got the first 4, but not the last 2. So what was the reasoning for that?
Yeah, and that's to do with the colour coding here too. So the blue ones are the drawn down from the things that you deliver directly to the community in terms of your delivery and your investment, whereas the tan ones come from your values. So they're still areas of focus, but they're drawn from the values in your framework. So they're from the values down the left-hand side. And so that's the difference between those two. Yeah.
Well, could you just expand upon that and share the thinking around when this is presented beautifully, graphically to the community in terms of the commitments that council makes? Those light brown ones, the intent wasn't necessarily to have them front and centre as strategic investment areas. It is to have them again kind of in the background, much as we did with the last LTP, as in that's the focus for running the organisation, but not delivering to the community. Is that right? So they're not necessarily in the overall framework front and centre.
Yeah, that's right.
So my next question, if I can keep going, was were we just specifically talking about 3 waters, or are we meaning that to be infrastructure? I know that a lot of the bullet points are talking about the water, but I mean, should that be a wider infrastructure since we do more than just 3 waters?
Yeah, and I guess that's my question back to the table. The strategic priority that was articulated to us from this group was 3 waters.
Can I just, sorry, I'm jumping in again, but the 4 that are highlighted there are not the only things that will be invested in. So there is obviously all of the BAU and the commitments that we have to deliver as a council organisation. It's helpful to have a small number of very focused investment areas that you want to work on over the next 3 to 10 years. And infrastructure as a whole, waste, transport, roading, streetlights and water will of course be delivered as it always is. But I think the recognition when we heard from you in the Wānanga was that right now, in the short term, 3 waters is incredibly important given the reforms.
I guess I'm saying I just wondered if there's any, if it's if there's a gap by not having something for, not calling it infrastructure and then having a bullet point for, say, roading or something as significant as that, say, safer roads or something. I was just putting it out there. If it was just too narrow, I'd just focusing on Three Waters.
It's a really good question, because the risk is then if you go back up to broad and call it infrastructure as a whole, then we can come under challenge for, but you said you're investing in that, but you're actually putting it over here. So it's that choice between having a broad priority and a narrow priority and what that means further down the track.
Well, I wasn't meaning that. I was meaning if it was called infrastructure, you could have a bullet point, something about your roads or something like, like building, safer roads or something, something like that was what I was, not having it broad so it opened up everything. But that's fine if we want to have the priority as Three Waters, then that's fine. I was just putting it out there and questioning, was that just too narrow by just being Three Waters? And the other one was the head, and Leslie can challenge me on this one, but just the heading of housing, and I liked where Leslie was coming from when she suggested it, but I didn't necessarily like the word housing itself, and I wondered if it was something like residential development or something like that. We've got development in there twice, and we've got housing in there twice in the bullet points, but I wondered if it was more about development rather than just housing, because I sort of you see housing and the first thing people say is, oh, well, you don't really do anything to do with it's not what you do, but that's not where Leslie was coming from when she was saying that it was enabling it and things like that. So I was just wondering if there was a better word that might capture what we were trying to mean for housing, because I just sort of didn't necessarily loved where it was coming from, but I just didn't necessarily like the word housing itself. So, like residential development or something. But again, I'm just putting it out there.
No, just in response to that through the chair. I thought about that as well, but I couldn't think of a better solution, because I think housing, whether it's industrial development or whether it's residential, I think the word housing kind of threads its way through all the different types of housing and development.
Maybe housing development.
No, I'm with Gavin. I like the word enablement.
Housing enablement.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Enabling housing, be it rural or urban.
Yeah, just something about housing
By itself,
housing on its own doesn't seem quite. No. So.
That's why I said housing and growth enablement.
Yeah.
Because growth involves all other infrastructure.
Yeah, that was, thank you, Mr. Chair. That was talked about, I talked about that a little bit earlier and a few people picked up on that as well. Is it just housing, or is it thinking about housing and employment, which is the growth bit? Because you may have a population increasing at 120 people per year, but that is assuming that a third of those people have jobs. So it's another thing for, and I'm really interested in your feedback on that. Is it just housing, or is it housing and employment? Because also, if that's a focus area, then that trickles down into the district plan. So when we're doing the zones review, after the growth strategy, is that about opening up new land for just housing, or is it also about having land so we're clustering businesses rather than having businesses sort of popping up in rural zones and not clustered together? Housing and employment as well, just wondering about, or growth, just wondering about that.
Leslie.
If someone's got a comment on the same thing, I can wait. Got a new topic.
Okay, I'll put you down on the list then. Leslie.
Just the recreation facilities and Whakatane Centre, I think could possibly send a red flag to some people. And I'm just wondering on the first bullet point, maintaining momentum on long-standing Rex Morph priority for recreation and emergency management, full stop. And then have a second bullet point to kind of explain and link it to growth and development. because we do know when people are looking for new places to come and stay, they're looking for recreation and lifestyle enhancements, not just for children, but also for our retirement community. And I think it just might need to, it would explain it a little bit more for someone who's already got the, take back position. Oh, okay, that's what that means. So it's a little bit, like Gavin says, explain the why. I don't know, open to interpretation.
Lainey?
Can I just test the group feeling on that one? Because this is one we struggled with in terms of the positioning of how specific to go versus how kind of to get the essence of what it was about. And there was a recognition through the work of the growth strategy, from the economic development strategy and so on, that the Whakatane township is critical to the future of the district and the Eastern Bay, for that matter, and making sure that the amenity offering as a whole, which also includes the hospital, schools, playgrounds and so on, is absolutely critical to ensuring that we have a solid population base and a future prosperity. So I think we'd be really interested to hear any other feedback on that point. We know that every time we put something around the township into a plan, the rest of the district kind of goes, well, hang on, what about us? Which is fair enough, because actually investing in our main township means that obviously we can't spend on other things elsewhere. But there is a balance to strike, because it's really important to have a very vibrant hub so that it can draw new people, but also support the people that are already here. So I think it would be helpful to hear whether the focus is on recreation at Rex Morpeth, because originally it said Rex Morpeth. That was the blue, that's what it said in the blue bubble. And we actually opened it up slightly to recreation, but is it actually about ensuring our main township maintains a sort of critical mass of amenity? So I'd love to hear any thoughts on that.
Thank you. I'll go to Tony.
Hi, me again. We clarified before about how the value of enhancing relationships with Eden, that was interwoven through the strategic priorities. Can we actually state that somewhere on that, in that section, or even if it is a little raranga line going through the priorities that actually states it as part of that whole makeup of the strategic priorities? Because really, when we want to be able to see, we can be told that's what's happening, but when we talk about the investment, because we look directly at these priorities and we use that as our reasoning for investment, if it's not seen there, then it's very easy for it to become disconnected around anything lining up for investment on what's needed, because I want to know, okay, how is that happening? What work are you doing? Because there's no investment going here. There's nothing that I can see that says we're doing anything in that area. So I think that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Thanks, Lainey, for unpacking that about the recreation facilities. I think it reflects the lack of momentum we've had, so I think that was quite a key thing for us to keep progressing Rex Morpeth specifically, so that it didn't languish again and get shunted down the road. So I think from speaking from the council, we're all fairly united in making sure that project does not get delayed for another 3 years. So I get why you're probably wanting to de-risk it potentially by putting it down the list. My question is, if we're putting recreation facilities as our strategic priority, are there other recreation facilities that we're including in that? And then other staff and have capacity to do that? So are we making it more challenging for ourselves?
Gavin?
In regard to your recreational facilities being based around Rex Morpeth, I think every small community's got an abundance of playing fields. You look at Eachcombe, they have huge areas of playing fields. So I don't think that's an issue. Awakuri, Maratara, etc., Titiko. My concern with Rex Morpeth is that if you're going to concentrate everything in Rexmorpeth Park, do you have the facilities? Do you have the parking? Do you have the accessibility like traffic and parking and all that sort of stuff? Or do you need to, if you want everything in Whakatane, do you need to have 2 or 3 hubs rather than concentrate everything on Rexmorpeth? Because I don't know if everyone will fit in there.
Couple of comments from me then. Oh, Andrew?
You go first.
You sure?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. In terms of housing, I think I agree with Julie around, but I do think kind of housing and development would be a nice phrase because yeah. 3 Waters, I'm happy. I disagree with Julie on this. Yeah, no, it's good. It's all conversation starters. I think it should be a priority around water just because of the reform going on around water. I think that is a specific priority. We do address some other infrastructure under resilience and emergency management, which is where I think those priority investments is around making those both more robust and more resilient. And I like to make the distinction. I've talked about this before. I wasn't sure I liked the word 3 Waters as the heading though, because it just is so reminiscent of previous failed reform attempts. So water services maybe or something. In terms of the recreation facilities in Whakatane, I agree that I think that's, my opinion is probably the worst way to phrase it, because it's talking about recreational facilities like there's loads of them and just for Whakatane Centre. So I would say Rexmorpeth Hub. Be really clear because that is what we're talking about, a priority around finishing that project or bringing it to completion one way or the other. But I'm wondering whether we could talk about Rexmorpeth Hub as a district facility because it's not just for Whakatane Centre, it's a facility for the district. So if we frame it in that way, I think it's more clear what we're actually trying to do. And also, yeah. And one other thing which was under organisational culture, I'm not sure this entirely captured, I think what's in there is good, but it hasn't captured everything that we were talking about when this has come up among councillors. And this is maybe one of the places where, again, Carolyn's point earlier around kind of enabling community could be in there, because I think that's one of the things that when we talked about organisational culture, we were talking about council being a can-do, empowering organisation, and what we got here is important. It's all about how we be a fit-for-purpose kind of organisation. But I think as councillors, the thing we were interested in was how do we orient ourselves to be more enabling and supportive of the community. So, yeah. Andrew.
Thank you, agree with you on the Rexmorpeth. It is more than just a Whakatane Centre facility. I still feel that recreation facilities in Whakatane, it falls a bit flat. I mean, there's more going on than just Rexmorpeth, and I think that could be elaborated on. We already agreed that the cost and efficiency would be cost efficiency and affordability, right? We've agreed on that one, Walt? Okay. I just think recreation facilities in Whakatane Centre, there's more to it than what's portrayed in those 3 bullet points.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just remind us as well that, there is, and it's not on that page, but there is another piece in here which talks about the established levels of service commitments underneath all this stuff. So we're not saying we don't, there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on beyond what's articulated here. This is just the sharp end of our focus for new or extra activity or on top of what we normally do. Karen.
Echoing your thoughts about the community, but maybe we could have a line somewhere in that cost and efficiency about partnerships with the community groups or shared services. I'm looking for, as we currently do, but and especially as we go into more sub-regional kind of conversations, that we are actively looking for partnerships with other councils to shared services and minimising our costs in that way. And I don't quite see that in those bullet points.
Thank you, Carolyn. I think that's... Oh, Leslie?
First of all, I'd support what Nandal said about, just stated, it's Rex Morpeth in Whakatane district. Because you're right, whether you're from Murupara or you're from Matata, you come in inadvertently somewhere along the line to Rex Morpeth. But I do think we need to have another category. You've got Rex Morpeth for recreation and emergency management, but also the broader appeal, about bringing in for retirement and for families. Really pleased to see resilient and emergency management there. 6 years ago, it was just like a word in a statement, so we've come a long way there. And I'm just wondering, under organisational culture, agree we need to have can-do, like we need to send a message to the community that we're there to help, we're there to enable. Just third bullet point, focus on maintaining performance under pressure and constraint. I don't know whether that is necessary, because if you're looking at ongoing reform and change required within the organisation adaptability, doesn't that adaptability talk about being able to work with all the constraints and pressures that we've got? I would have thought ensuring tools and systems and processes was way more valuable than performing under pressure. Yep, that's it. And Lainey, did you get what you wanted from when you asked the question to the group about the recreation facilities one?
I think we're hearing quite a strong message to be specific, which I'm actually grateful for, because I think that will land well in terms of clarity for the community. Thank you.
It looks like that brings us to, we'll talk out over strategic priorities.
Yeah. Hey, kia ora, and thank you very much for all your feedback. So we'll do some work to take this to the next level again. One thing that I guess is a big challenge is just recognising how much the organisation does all the time, and trying to capture it within something that's this big, right? So there is quite a lot of articulation and document that sits behind that, but we're not kind of ready or to bring that to you. So we'll take the feedback from today. I think there's been some really good discussion and some really good feedback, and continue to develop the framework and bring it back to you. The other thing that we're thinking about is, this needs to have purpose in terms of when you are faced with LTP decisions. So we're starting to think about, well, how do we take particularly your strategic priorities, but the whole framework, how do we use that to actually inform your prioritisation process when it comes to that. And that's it, but thank you very much.
Just before we move on, I just want to say thank you. I think you've done a really great job. We've had quite a few different discussions. You've had to kind of harvest that up, make sense of it, make it coherent, and reflect it back to us for our continued, further feedback. You've done a great job, so thank you very much. Yeah.
Sorry, just one last comment, if you don't mind. Just thinking about flavouring it somehow with our communications, about this being a community that is for the future of families and retirees, because that is such a big member, a growing population is our retirement population, and if we can flavour that word in there somewhere along there, I think that might go a wee way to helping people think, oh, okay, they're thinking about us. Yeah.
Where's our retirement?
Yeah. It's coming, Andrew.
Kevin.
Can I just make a suggestion, rather than the 15 minutes we've got left, should we leave this till we come back at 1 o'clock so we have a fair bash at it? And in the meantime, we could work out who's going with who, so we have a limited amount of cars going over.
Yeah, thank you. That was going to be my question to Paul, was around how we take on this next piece.
I think that's a good idea. 19 minutes would be a fast approach. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. Let's work out our transport then. First of all, apologies to staff for delaying proceedings the way we have, but it just didn't feel like we could rush away from the funeral too quickly. So apologies for putting the time frame out, and for those of you who stay behind. And apologies for eating in front of you. It's our chance to get some lunch. Apart from that, thank you. And Paul, I think we're in your hands.
Thank you. I'll try not to make you choke on your super rolls. Okay. Hang on. Why aren't we?
Oh, I should just say before we start, so we'll go through the financial strategy and finish the long-term plan stuff. Then I think you said we're going to go to the public excluded because our guests have some time constraints themselves. Then we'll come back to the other stuff. Hopefully we'll just have to see how far we get, really. Yeah. And so that's a reminder on councillors to be succinct and with your questioning and only ask things that really matter. Cool. Right, Paul, thank you.
Sorry, our clicker's gone defunct at the moment, so I just can't get through the slide. While it's being, I'll start without the clicker, while that's being sorted. But fairly short session on the financial strategy today. To go through three things. First is just what is the financial strategy, which I know a number of you will be familiar with, so we'll go through it relatively quickly and probably focus on some of the things that have sort of added in for emphasis this time round. The second, again, we'll go through pretty quickly because we've spoken about a lot of these key influences and you're all well aware of what they are, but really just how they will impact on the strategy. And then spend more of the time on the areas of focus, which what we're looking for with that is just to get a sense of direction from elected members as to any allergic reactions, any areas of strong agreements, or anything else that we can add. Because what will come out of this, once we have this conversation, is we'll work up a more concrete strategy to bring for you in the next month or so. You've seen this before, so I'll just skip over it. It was interesting, this slide was done before the actual recent round of local government change that's been suggested. So all I'll say to that one is not only is it not as business as usual LTP, but it's even more so now, and not as business as usual LTP. So what is the financial strategy? To run through the left-hand slide, you may have seen these things before, but ultimately what it outlines is effectively how we plan to fund and finance our operations and investments over the course of the long-term plan. I think I just briefly mention the difference between funding and financing because it comes up quite a bit. So funding is effectively where the money is coming from, so it would be rates or development contributions or the like. Financing is actually where we are actually sourcing the funds from, so via debt or in most cases, is the majority of where that financing will come from. It supports what we spoke about this morning in terms of supporting the strategic priorities. And probably the hardest part in working through the financial strategy is this balance between financial prudence, affordability, investment and delivery of value for money. So obviously we try to do best delivery of value for money through everything we do, but the real trick is balancing this level of investment versus affordability and actually what that means for the community. I think just the right-hand side is more just some of the things that are going to impact our strategy more than what we've seen in the past. So not just the normal factors such as population and land use, but the level of change that we're actually going through from an external environment perspective and from a government perspective is probably going to be, I think, the 15 or 16 LTPs that I've done is probably the most that I've seen that's actually going to be at play as we work through this one. And therefore what this financial strategy seeks to do is look at where we've got opportunities to look to do different ways to fund and finance investment, and that's what we're going to sort of concentrate on, sort of starting today to start to bring forward what some of those things would be, just to get your feedback on. Again, I'll go through this really quickly because you've heard it all before. Waters, local government reform, rates capping, development levies, balanced budget. Every one of those, and probably external LTPs, of the 15 LTPs I've done, I've actually never put any of those up and not just any of them, but development levies is probably the only one. So it just shows the amount of external influence that actually is going to make this quite a tricky long-term plan. Waters, the decision on the CCO significantly impacts the financial strategy, and on the other hand, it makes no difference. Just to explain what I mean there is that the CCO decision will impact on some of our borrowing levels and some of our key ratios, but I think what often gets forgotten through the Waters conversation is the same people pay, and therefore as we are building up this financial strategy, at the moment we've got Waters in for the numbers that we're doing. We aren't like some councils where if you take Waters out it makes a massive difference to, from a rating perspective. Some councils have got a higher weighting towards Waters than the rest. The numbers we have at the moment don't show that. But it's a really significant decision. Probably the biggest thing that it will make is just in terms of timing is not ending up having to actually run scenarios side by side of Waters in and out as we move through the consultation into the next financial year. So that's probably the biggest implication that will come through Waters. I thought I'd just put this slide up, and before I do, it was really reflective in Auckland came out at 7.9% of their rates yesterday. That is fundamentally the cost of the CRL, actually the rail link effectively coming online next year. And I guess what this slide represents effectively is the bulk of what flows into our operational costs comes from our capital program. And this is just an outline of at a very high level how it works. So taking from the second dot point down, basically 7 to 10% for every dollar of our new CapEx, our OpEx goes up by 1%. What that means is with a capital program of 40 million, before we do anything else, at the midpoint our rates are going up by 3.75. You add on to that the local government cost index, which often runs a little bit higher than CPI, at another say 3%, and we're staring down the face of probably closer to 4.5 next year now. And we take off growth. What that means is at a capital program at 40 million, we're actually at a rate increase of 6.25. So you can see the dilemma that actually happens when the government's talking about these rates caps at 4%, and how do we get down about that? So I just to leave you with that one is that it's one of the biggest challenges in local government is, and I use that CRL as the example because, Auckland they've got 100 million of cost savings to get their rates down to 7.9%, and that's fundamentally the cost of that capital program actually coming on stream.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. If we can stay on that slide, that would be good. So you're saying the CapEx flow-on costs are CapEx projects we haven't delivered in this current or last couple of financial years?
No, the capital. So if we deliver we deliver a capital program somewhere between $40 and $50 million every year. I'm saying with that is that the cost of interest, the cost of depreciation, the cost of any additional operation expenditure to run it is 7 to 10% of that capital cost. So if you spend $1 million, somewhere between 70,000 and 100,000, the next year it goes into our operating expenditure as additional operating expenditure, and that's it's the hardest thing to do within local government. You said the question about growth this morning, for example. It's the flow on operational expenditure that's and we don't have all that population turning up at once that causes the cost to increase, which is why growth offset is only at sort of 0.5%. So that's the challenge that faces us. And the financial strategy is designed in some ways to move that number higher by looking at different ways of doing things.
Just supplementary. So does that mean the CapEx flow-on cost includes depreciation and renewals? So is that where you might have some wriggle room?
It includes depreciation. And interesting, so I don't want to keep dwelling on this one, but I will use it as the example. One of the proposals put up in Auckland was to go to 5.9% by not funding depreciation. Now, the problem is, if you don't fund depreciation, you incur that higher cost in the future when you look to replace the assets. So it pushes the can down the road. And that's the issue that actually happens with that, is that you will incur much higher debt levels in the future if you don't fund the right level of depreciation. So yes, there is some wiggle room in it, and one of the things that we'll do when we go to the long-term plan is just look at how our depreciation reserves are comparing towards our future renewal program, and sort of say, well, you know, if we're well funded in a certain area, we'll suggest that we actually bring some of that depreciation funding down. If we're short, we will suggest, and that's the rating revaluation was a great example of where we're likely to be short because that cost is pushed up higher than what we planned.
Thank you.
Julie, then Gavin.
Thanks. Excuse me, I might be a bit food doolally here, but our capital program would actually be a lot less because the Three Waters is going to be taken out and ring fenced, so that won't come into this, the rates cap figure. So the 6.25, it won't get that high because our capital program wouldn't be anywhere near 40 million with the waters taken out ring fenced.
Yeah, it's a great question. The issue is that with the capital coming out, the revenue comes out as well, and our rates, our water rates relative to the rest aren't that dissimilar. So we're sort of running around, when we did the numbers for next year, it was sort of 8 to 9% on waters, 9.4 is the number that we've got. So we're not seeing, some councils are saying, and you'll hear it, is that they're taking waters out, their rates is coming down to 5%.
Yeah.
But I'll come back to the previous slide, as the same people are still paying because they're still paying 15% for waters, potentially on there as well. So, so it's a really good point. We've left it all in for now, just because of that reason, is that the numbers don't get distorted that much of what we're working with.
Okay, thank you.
Steve on that?
And just to add to that, even if council makes the decision by the end of the year to move to a CCO, the first year of our LTP still has waters in it because the CCO is 2028, so just remember that as well.
Gavin?
On that previous slide, previous to that one, you talked about provides capacity. So that means that once we get rid of Three Waters, we can borrow a lot more.
Yeah, that's in short correct.
And yet we're giving away the assets that allow us to borrow a bit more.
The reason you can borrow more if water's out in a CCO is that it works on a different borrowing covenant because it's treated like a utility organisation. That allows you to borrow up to 500% of revenue as opposed to the 280% that we can borrow through council. But again, the issue with borrowing is someone's got to pay it back.
So if our average rates is $5,000 a year, and once we take Three Waters out, it comes back to $3,000, but they're still going to get charged $2,000 from water rates. So when you say we've got extra capacity, the ratepayers are going to be screaming murder, won't they?
Yeah, just to clarify what I mean by that is we have extra borrowing capacity effectively on there. So we could go and borrow a whole lot more, but again, the other side of borrowing a whole lot more is the cost of that will go up. So, yeah.
Oh, another one on the next page. We've always been told CapEx is different from OpEx, but what you're saying is that the more CapEx you do, your OpEx is paying for your interest on the loan, you're paying for depreciation, all that sort of stuff, right? So how does that work when, for the last year, we've only spent 35% of our CapEx? So does that mean the allowance that we could have spent another 65% in the rates, it makes allowances for the extra appreciation we've actually never spent.
Yeah, we only effectively rate for the capital program for the year, not including the carry forward from the previous year, which means that we're not overrating in that, but we're effectively saying is that if I use the numbers for next year of 50 million capital program, say 15 million carry forward, we would only rate for the 50 million effectively.
But of that 50 million, we've only done 35%. So really, you've only done $18 million worth. Therefore, your amount of depreciation you've budgeted and the amount of interest you budgeted would be a heck of a lot lower.
For clarity, we're aiming, the 35% was based on the full program, including the carry forward, so that's based on actually 67 million, effectively, is what that percentage is based on, not the 50 million in that case. So it's included the carry forward amount is what the percentage is based on. So the intent would be that, if you look back over the last sort of 4 to 5 years, we've been delivering approximately 50 million of capital a year. Yeah. Give or take.
You can see why people talk about accounting being smoke and mirrors, eh? It's always a back point to it. Okay, thank you.
Tony.
I think I'm all right. I was trying to understand how it all worked because it sort of sounded like, we had the services with the waters and we had some debt, but then we were able to ship it off to our bro, who's gone and set up his own entity, and then being able to book up on a new credit card to go do some other spending. Sort of, is that sort of how it's gone?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But like all credit cards, we have to pay them back.
We've got to pay it back, and who's paying it back though? Our whānau.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's correct. Correct.
Malcolm? Thank you. Paul, development levies, are they set at a fixed percentage rate or is there a sliding scale depending on the development?
Yeah, so development levies are new. Development contributions are in place now. Development levies come in 2028 to replace them. They're based effectively on the cost of capital projects that contribute to growth. So only the growth element can be funded through a development contribution or levy. So if we're building a project that's sort of half renewing an asset and half allowing for future population growth, that half relating to population growth can be charged through a development levy or a contribution. The difference, in short, is a levy is more flexible because you can actually charge for transportation, for example, as opposed to charge for a road. It gives you more flexibility how you can use them effectively in there. The biggest thing I would say with that is that calculation changes a little bit for that, for the reason being is that the interest is paid through the development levy or contribution. So the 7 to 10% comes down by 5% because the interest is included within that levy.
Okay, because why I asked is, you may have seen in yesterday's Plenty Times about development levies in Tauranga going up to 7.5%, and some of the developers just going, hey, the amount we're going to have to pay is going to be huge. Why are we building? Why are we doing development? Now, if you did that to a small town, we might have the same problem.
Absolutely, and you'll see in Tauranga's case there are examples where they've actually funded through rates to actually keep those levies down to balance that affordability. So it is a balancing act effectively in there. Is that what I would say though is that whilst the developer pays it, they are largely built through the pricing. The end user effectively is paying the cost of those.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. They also can't become unaffordable, that it starts to actually drive development down. So it is very much a balance, and it's relative to the land cost.
Okay.
As to where it be. Once you get over a certain percentage of land cost, the development won't stack.
Okay, just my second question, and it's around depreciation. What percentage of depreciation do we use, say, to replace infrastructure? So I'm not looking for a slide, I'm hitting the wrong button. It depends on the life of the asset, so what we look to do is match the
depreciation with the expected life of the asset. So if it's a road and it's going to last 25 years, we'd charge 4% on it. And the reason for that is effectively, in theory, is that depreciation effectively comes in over time, it reduces our debt, and then when we replace the asset, the debt goes back up for that amount effectively. So that is effectively funding the replacement of that asset over the life of that asset. Now the problem we have is it's a future forecasting model. So the life of the asset doesn't always agree to what we thought it was going to be, and therefore there can be, and also the replacement cost can vary, which again comes back to that top point about local government cost indexes. Revaluations push our price, and we saw it with the roading revaluation. Valuation prices go up.
Okay, great. Thank you for those answers.
Thank you.
This is just a little chart I put in. It's actually based on the last long-term plan, which is distorted a little bit because it's got the full value of Rex Morpeth, which is what that top of the hat looks like within there. But regardless of where that hat sits, and this is meant in no way to rank our projects, but the $40 million line would be representative of, in the event of us not looking at doing things like growing our revenue differently or doing things at a 4% rating level, where we would need to sort of start to head down to actually keep within that rate cap level, which is, as you can see, is quite a slice off the top that would need to come. Now, we don't want to actually do that. We want to present back to you something that actually looks at different ways to fund and finance, so we can actually lift that $40 million line higher than what it is now, or for your decision whether to lift that line higher. But that just is a visual picture effectively of some of the pressure that's going to come on if and when we get moved to a rate capped environment.
Leslie?
Yeah, thanks. So that's excluding the boat harbour at the top of that diagram?
No, it's all that's included in there. This is based on the long-term plan, so it won't. Things will have changed since then. It was just an indicative picture, effectively. Like, I know things have changed since the long-term plan, so it won't be fully accurate now. But if we were keeping, the main point is keeping that capital program around that sort of 55 million level. In the absence of getting our revenue higher or our costs down, we would need to prioritise differently to actually get to that rating level.
Tony?
I just thought that it looks like Mount Putawaki, but also too, that is without the funding. So is that with the full cost without us getting any funding?
That's the total capital cost.
So it's a bit skewed.
It's really just to show the size of the capital that we're talking about. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep. If there were projects within there with large portions of external funding, that would change that again.
Gavin?
On that chart where the dotted line is, which is the bottom on the right-hand explanation, which is the assumed limit of the rates capping, so that big grey mess that's in there, is that corporate services? Or am I reading it wrong?
It's probably transportation connections, that one. So the two big, is it, or is it waters? Now, renewals is the bottom section. I'm just trying to see where waters is.
It was a bit hard to read.
Yeah. It'll be the water service delivery plan, because that's set at $21 million a year. So your bottom section will be renewals, which is the light blue, and the grey blue will be waters.
Pre-waters.
Yeah.
So once we get rid of that, our rates cap, a lot of it will sit underneath the rates cap.
No, because our revenue will come out as well, so that $40 million line will come down.
Okay. So that's actually quite disturbing, isn't it? Really? It's like the impossible dream.
Yeah, and I think that's, if we go back to that previous, that's what that's saying is, to get to from 6.25 to 4, we need to do things differently. And if I run to this is the elevator pitch from the financial strategy. Grow the revenue, reduce the cost, prioritise the capital. That's it in a nutshell. And it's deliberately put in that order to ensure that we look at all the opportunities we can on our revenue base, all the opportunities we can on our costs, before, because what the financial strategy should do is optimise how much you can spend. It doesn't mean you have to spend it, but it gives you the opportunities effectively to be able to do it.
The good news there is that you're seeing the challenges that the council has with a rates capping environment. So, this budget, which is essentially what Paul's talking about, is quite detailed and complicated. The financial strategy is one of the main things we're going to need to figure out as we go through the LTP, whereas normally it's something that's just used to fund the activities. Actually, it's probably the other way around. So,
So does that then mean that, given our last finance meeting a couple of weeks ago, where OPEX is $22 million than expenditure rather than income, that we need to do some drastic stuff really fast to try and get it down before we hit that?
No.
When the rates capping comes in?
No, we just need a good plan to get from here to rates capping. That's what we're talking about.
What I would say with that is the really important point is the balanced budget needs to be cleared before it, which is what we're saying, is that's where the costs need to come down relative to the revenue, to be able to make sure that we've actually got out of that balanced budget, because that will be really problematic on those numbers if it's still there.
Does that mean we need to start with the annual plan this year?
Well, we have. That's exactly what we've done. So we've made inroads into that, and that is now forecasting to have cleared the balanced budget by the time rates caps comes in. So it's exactly right.
Malcolm, did you have something?
Just as long as it's not an inappropriate question, but around Rex Morpeth development, have we looked at possibly selling advertising space or signage, or is that too tacky, or?
Alex, do you want to?
I think we're probably not there yet, but we're always looking for ways for revenue generation, so that would be something that could be taken into consideration.
Because, I was talking to a member of the Whakatane Golf Course a few weeks ago, and they were in dire straits with their income, so they sold off $30,000 worth of signage, which has put them back on a level playing field.
So hold that thought, because we've got a slide on revenue opportunities, and that's the sort of thing that we need to capture and move forward with.
Tony?
Oh, no, I thought we had a committee, a group that was working on that, because it's been like 2 years, and that was part of their role, was to look at, other sources of income, if they could get their other funding. Anyway, we're going off topic, we'll go back, thank you, sorry.
Yes, we do. We've got that investment funding stream of work that's in progress, and multiple avenues to go down in terms of funding opportunities, and naming rights, for example, is something that's part of that. So, yes.
Thank you. Paul?
Okay, so the next 3 slides really go through each one of those in a little bit more detail, and the purpose of this was really to get your feedback on, are there anything on these next 3 slides that you think is just crazy, and we'll take them off, or we want to hone in on, or more importantly, if there's anything else that you think, and Malcolm's just brought up, for example, naming rights and the like, which will fit into that external revenue piece of work that's done there. So if I just run through these really quickly, and then just pause for any conversation. But water harmonisation is something I understand you've discussed in the past in terms of our own harmonisation across the district in terms of that. So that will come to you as part of the long-term plan conversation in terms of how we can actually do that. I've put up their rating structure and differentials. Some of these are just ideas at this point. What I mean by there effectively is, and like if I look at the commercial sector, for example, if your rates for commercial rates are set at 1.7 of your prudential, you're tax neutral, meaning that a commercial organisation can claim GST, PAYE effectively, a person can't. So should they pay a bit more in the on the commercial side, acknowledging that what commercial does, it's part of their input prices that goes through, that gets charged in their product prices anyway, so no free lunch, but that's just a way of redistributing from a fairness and equity perspective. User fees, I'll just start with the risk and reward one first, and it's really just saying is we can spend a lot of time on user fees for not a lot of gain, so it was really just sort of coming down a funnel in terms of user fees of what are the ones we want to look at. Do we want to look at differentiation between local and non-local pricing, for example, because non-locals don't pay rates, locals do. So should they pay a bit more as a user fee effectively on some of our services? Charging for different levels of service, and sorry David, I can't think of a better example. Well, I can't think of any other example at the moment, but do we want to charge, for example, if you want a fast track consent, that you get it in 5 days or something, that you might pay twice as much for or something like that. Now, we need to know whether we can do it first, but that's the sort of thing we mean there, is there different levels of service that you pay a different amount for. External revenue and any other structures. So an example, I've had a brief conversation with Mayor and Deputy Mayor around things like city partners, for example. Are there, I'll be honest, a lot of externals don't like putting money into councils. So that can we structure things differently to actually encourage more external revenue within there. Regional council reform, I know I'm a broken record, but just conscious of the investment on quayside holding and what that might mean for us into the future. Other funding, I'll talk briefly about infrastructure funding and financing levies. They're currently outside of the rates cap. I think Nick mentioned to you in his waters update that we're talking to the National Infrastructure Agency around some options that potentially could use those levies to fund our infrastructure. Again, coming back, same people pay, but it is outside of the cap, and would increase our capacity to be able to spend if that was a decision we wanted to do. So I'm just going to pause there in terms of any comments, take that off the list, add something to the list, focus on that on the list. Because what I'll do with this is actually then start to frame that into a strategy.
I'd also add that people have an opportunity to email any ideas,
absolutely,
right ideas through. So, Tony, then Leslie.
So what you're explaining about what actually ends up getting capped and what doesn't can, determine how we arrange things as part of the strategy. Is that right? Or there's some certain rules we would have to follow, I guess, but it's sort of, it feels like rearranging the deck chairs, but ones are going to have harsher cutbacks than others.
There is certainly an element of we're looking at other options effectively to fund things within there. Some of that absolutely recognise that we don't want to just call something a levy and say it's okay with the ratepayer paying, acknowledge of that. But they're also, the other side of that is, well, if we have to do $10, $15 million less capital, what does that actually mean for the community in terms of what's delivered? So this is all about fairness, equity, affordability of all of those things actually fitting together in some ways. But what we're wanting to do is bring to you as big a shopping cart effectively as we can to be able to actually look at ways to fund and finance things into this long-term plan, not just rates.
Supplementary, and that includes also kicking the can further down the road, is that right?
Well, that's where it crosses over to the conversation we had this morning around the prioritisation, around the strategy, and how we prioritise. And, the issue of kicking the can down the road on some things is
they're going to cost
cheapest
more.
time to do anything is now, but acknowledging that we have to be able to actually pay for it now as well. So,
Thank you.
Leslie?
Thank you. Yeah, just some comments is that, yes, I think we do need to look at a differential rating structure for commercial operators who are able to have a claim against their business structures, other things that the resident can't. The risk versus reward on user fees, I agree that it's very time consuming for probably a negligible amount compared to looking at, you know, the rating structure and charging for different levels of service, yeah. And of course, I'm really keen on trying how we can get further external funding sources with sponsorship and naming rights and all of those sorts of things, yeah.
Thank you. Carolyn, did you have something?
I just wasn't clear on what water harmonisation.
Sorry.
Quickly go over that.
Sure. So we have numerous water schemes across the district now. They're all charged at a different pricing level. So this is looking at how we ensure that for the same level of service that exists across the district, you pay the same amount, and that's not the case at the moment. So you'll pay a different fee depending on where you live. So this looks to harmonise that.
Julie?
Thanks. I have a differing opinion to Leslie about, and I realise it is only an example you were giving, but I'm going to say it because about the commercial. A lot of our commercial and the businesses around here are actually small businesses. We don't have a lot of great big ones. And it's all right saying you have to claim your GST, you can claim, but you still have to pay the bloody thing in full in the first place. And most of the businesses are suffering from cash flow issues. So, and they are also the least users of council services. A business is not a user of a swimming pool or anything like that. So the only services you don't get the services. They're not, a business is not a user of a road or anything. You might get waste collection and water, but there's not much else that a business as itself gets. It's the actual person and the people. So I don't know. I think it's a bit tough to put council costs too much on them. But if you could put it on a bigger commercial businesses, then that's a different thing entirely.
Thank you. Wilson?
Yeah, just to contradict what Julie was saying to a certain degree. The rates are on the land and buildings, not on the actual business. I know they get passed on, but
They get passed on.
yeah, but everyone that comes to town uses roads. They use a lot of council facilities and that. So yeah, I could counterproduct to, and yeah, there might be a whole lot, and they are just small businesses in town. But some of the building owners are actually in quite a big way. So,
but a commercial lease passes on the rates to the business owner, not the landlord.
yeah, well, that's something that each business has got to make their own mind up on.
It's generally in a commercial lease that you land that.
Tony?
Sorry, I'm still processing. I've just realised that what you were talking about levies, because I was saying, what about, I've heard other places have bed tax or something, types of charges that they have for, big groups that come in or big festivals or something like that, or visitors. We're still hurting people who've got no money anyway, but anyway, we've got no money either.
Thank you. There was one, I don't think we are able to charge on like short stay accommodation places, Airbnb, those kinds of things. I've been getting some emails about it recently.
Yeah, I think some councils like Auckland, Rotorua effectively are charging a short-term commercial. They're charging them as a commercial property. The issue on the Airbnb is incredibly hard to administer and monitor. But that's certainly something that we can look into in terms of that short-term commercial charge.
All right, thank you. I think if there's further points people want to make, they can email them through and you'll incorporate them as far as they're suitable.
operating expenditure. The first statement is probably more a statement than a question, effectively. But I think, you know, if the government moves beyond November, and its current commentary would be is they don't really give us a lot of sympathy for the fact that our costs exceed CPI. They will set caps relative to CPI. And that's is really just another challenge that exists within there. The second point I've just said is, like, you know, does council want us to do any benchmarking? I think, you know, benchmarking has some value, but it also has some risk. It's what I've seen over the years is often we spend more time debating about why we're different than actually. But you know, there can be some things that we can bring to you that sort of says where we are hunting in the pack in terms of, you know, the classic one is that, you know, that comment around user fees in terms of how do we compare to others, and we're on the low end, but there are reasons we're on the low end as well. I think this will be something that continues to come up as a level of services that we want to review. We've had this discussion as staff, and you know, one of the things that we're going to be doing is looking at our levels of service relative to the cost of them to the benefits provided, and therefore we can refine that list down for you to look at other things that, you know, that we could look at in more detail. You know, last week the week before the government announced, you know, up to 10,000 job losses, and they're going to use AI to fix a lot of that. By no means am I suggesting that through that line, but it is something that we can look at in terms of how we use AI more in terms of delivery of service and what that might mean for us. Shared services, again, some of these slides are written before the conversations of late, which might impact on that, but it still is, you know, something that we can look into. The comment on funding of risk, I think I've mentioned to you, and we've spoken about rates cap in the past. One of the biggest issues that's going to come about, I think, will be as councils that currently collect some money to actually deal with risk, and risk is getting harder and harder to manage. In a rates cap environment, that might be something that goes by the wayside or lessens in terms of what we put aside and do with it when it happens. So that again is something we can bring to you in terms of what would be the you know, an appropriate level of risk funding or not. And then the thing I said before is our biggest impacts is capex flowing through to OPEX. So, any questions on that page or thoughts?
You said a little bit earlier that if we have a water CCO, we're allowed to loan up to 500% of the water revenue. But for council, we can only borrow up to everything else, up to 280% of our rates revenue, or total revenue.
Operating revenue.
Operating revenue. So if we, I forgot what my question was. It was, I know, it sounded really good, eh? If we, will the government, with the rates capping enforcement, alter what councils can borrow up to? Like, will they adjust that? And I know 280% is the maximum for all councils, or was that just our one?
280% was increased through COVID. So there are some councils like Taronga that's got an exemption to 350, but the growth councils.
But to accommodate a rates cap and our normal activities and future activities, do you think the government might adjust our percentage that we can loan against?
If we change them.
Short answer, no.
Okay.
Fundamentally, because it's one of the biggest things that underpins where those limits come from is the local government funding agency has got a credit rating which is similar to all of government. The reason it's got that credit rating is because it doesn't let councils go over those percentages. If they do start to exceed it, that will drop the overall sector's credit rating, and it sort of starts to unwind the benefits of the funding agency. So I don't think the government will police it, it'll be the sector will police it.
Also too, I see that The rates capping policy from central government is fundamentally about reducing council spends, not enabling them to increase it in other ways. So I couldn't see why that would happen, because it would be contradicting what the government is trying to achieve.
Okay. And can you remind me again where we're sitting at? I know once we get to our, I've seen those graphs.
160?
160.
Yeah, ballpark.
All right, thanks. It was just really asking, because we've brought it up before, does that mean that it starts pushing us into looking at what we can sell off?
I'll just hold that forward.
Thank you.
Funding of risk. Is it expected that you'd need more funding for that, or are you looking at the risk profile where you can bring it down a little bit?
Yeah, it's the problem with the funding of risk is if you don't fund it regularly, you're putting all of that cost to a future generation. So it sort of goes against the whole intergenerational equity conversation. So what I mean is, if, say, for example, we were charging $1 million a year to ratepayers now, those ratepayers are paying to fund our risk of something that might happen in the future. If we don't do any of that, then and something happens next year or the year after, those ratepayers will bear all of the cost of that moving forward. So it's really an intergenerational equity conversation about how much we do with that.
So do we appreciate funds for that, do we?
No. We just, it's a question of, I think in roading, for example, we have a road reserve, a roading emergency reserve effectively to pay for emergency events and things like that. So, but the other side of it is rates. Which is why I suspect councils will seriously look at that and start to bring that number down to actually try and get that rate number down. It's a little bit like non-funding depreciation in the sense is that it will incur costs higher in the future.
The temptation in this new model is that instead of putting money aside contingency for flooding emergencies and landslides and things like that, so you've got something there to fund those things when they happen, you actually just don't do that. When it does happen, you target rate, because at the moment the rate for emergency is not included in the rates cap.
Okay.
So that creates a bit of a temptation to shift the model.
Okay.
The government's also indicated that to get the special exemption for the rates cap, that's one of the, it's probably one of the only things that they said they're prepared to look at too, is you might be able to get an exemption from the rates cap for those kind of emergency scenarios.
Okay, thank you.
So just on capital expenditure, just the top two of those, prioritisation and delivery, is something that we've got a very high focus on at the moment, and we'll talk a little bit more in tomorrow's annual plan paper around a change to the approach for this year, which will look to reduce our carry forward and rebudget over a longer period of time. Purpose of that is to actually get away from this relatively low percentage delivery number and improve that. Core versus non-core, I really don't like it, but that's where we're at. The timing, I think we alluded to it earlier, do it now, do it later. The cheapest time to do it is now, balanced against affordability. So we'll be doing, as staff, we'll be bringing a lot to you through the long-term plan in this area around how we focus priorities, how it aligns to the conversation we had this morning in terms of strategic priorities, and what that might mean in terms of the timing of our capital program. I use this horrible two words called value curves, but it's really just an understanding within our projects to make sure that we know where to turn the tap off. And what I mean is Some projects you need to deliver the entire thing to get a really good outcome. Some, once you get past a certain point, the last 20% is not worth spending the money on. So really drilling into that from a business case perspective to understand where would our point be to cut off on that. Tony, asset recycling was the words that you were referring to before. I think really importantly, we don't want to sell the silverware. It's not what that is about. What it's about is effectively is if we do have assets that no longer are either required to deliver a council service or a future purpose or are not producing some sort of return, that would be part of the conversation about, what do we do with those assets moving forward. And then delivery models, and ultimately we're talking, waters was the big one at mind when we wrote that, but that's what that one was about. Oh, sorry, sweat versus dehydrate. Yeah, someone asked me what I meant by that, and you don't die from sweating, but you may from dehydration. So it's drawing the line about where do we want to sweat our assets and make them work hard, but we don't want to get to the point where actually they can't recover, and it's very expensive to recover from. So it's
I don't know if it's your Aussie accent, but I start thinking of Olivia Newton-John's "Let's Get Physical." No, sorry.
I can't respond to that. Yeah. So just in terms of next steps, obviously we're going to build the strategy that's compliant with the legislation, but quite frankly, that's not really where the focus will be over the next 3 months. There's a whole lot of things that need to be built that are compliant, but they will come out of what we do. The real areas that we want to focus on is the last 3 slides effectively, and actually building those so we can bring those opportunities back to you and look at what options that we've got to move forward. And that's me.
Thank you, Paul, for all of that. If we went back to the last couple of long-term plans in the same historical place, those last 3 slides, are they really any different?
Subtly, I think. Some are not so subtle. Things like infrastructure funding and financing levies are something that is new and a different way of doing things. One of the big omissions, and I realised it when I put the slides together and it came up today, is development contributions and levies are one thing that I think is certainly an area that we want to have a much stronger look at where we've been in the past. I think the capital prioritisation is another area effectively that we can ensure that is actually closer to what we are delivering. So I think you're right, is that there's no silver bullet on any of those slides, but it's really looking at some of the different things we can do that. I think, to recognise, rates are a blunt instrument, and we don't have a huge amount of options to work with, but the ones that we can work with, we want to just make sure that we are actually maximising those to the extent we can. So, yeah, it's a good. If anyone's got any other ideas, please, love to hear them. Send them through.
Yeah, just a supplementary to that. So I guess I'm going down the path of, should we just leave the financial strategy as it is, if what we're suggesting here on prioritisation is not really going to make as much difference as what we might like? Save your time on other stuff that's coming up.
Yeah, I think it is worth really just exhausting some of those things. I don't want to be a little bit flippant around user fees by sort of saying only look after the big things, but small things do add up as well. So I think we do need to exhaust it to maximise the value out of it. Even if it only moves the line up by a few million, it's a few million more of things that we can deliver. So I do think we do need to do that on it. Some of those things could be quite large within there. Like that IF is a good example of one that could actually make quite a big difference in there. And I probably need to spend a little bit more time explaining exactly what that looks like. But yeah, you're right in terms of we're not going to see a financial strategy that says here's the answer to all of the things. What we'd like to see come out of it is something that we can go out to the business to say, here's the parameters that we're actually able to work with to actually deliver something that makes sense, so that we don't end up with these iterations of, put the number out, it's 25% rates, and we cut and go through that. So the intent would be that by doing this work up front and doing it, we can be we have a really good understanding of how much. It's like anyone's income. You know how much your income is, you budget to do that. We need to understand what our full income bucket looks like before we head into things.
Okay. Just another question, if you don't mind, Mr Chair. And I know that we're obligated to review the financial strategy for the LTPs. Working with, who are they? Not Audit New Zealand now, what are they called? The Audit Office. If we don't make any significant change, or if we do, is that Audit New Zealand going to find things that we, how we have this toing and froing with Audit New Zealand? If we kept the financial strategy relatively the same, but just changed some of the priorities, do they come back and challenge us on that?
They'll only challenge, they audit to the legislation and to the accounting standards. So long as you're compliant with that,
Okay.
you can, I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. You can produce a pretty terrible plan that'll get the audit tick if it's legally compliant, but that might be not a very good plan for the community. So, but that's not their role. Their role isn't to say, is it a good plan for the community? Their role is to say, have you complied with the law, including how you engage with the community? But that will be the extent of where their focus sits on.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment to say I think it would be worth doing a review of our levels of service. I know, Julie, you've mentioned that before, and I don't know how that would look like, whether we just get feedback from staff first or...
Staff will go through and do the exercise of understanding what our levels of service are and the cost and benefit of those levels of service to see where, and bring to you what would be, for questions as what do you want to look at based on the opportunities that might exist there.
Because it's following on from what Karen said. I think it's not just levels of service, it's service delivery in itself as well. Like, are these services things that we do still actually have to be doing, full stop? Like levels of service is a change in what you're doing, but I think it's slightly wider. I think it's, do we need to be still doing this?
Yeah, we had a session with all of our Tier 3 managers as well last week, and that came up under the banner of Section 17A reviews, which, forgetting about the actual piece of legislation, understanding is what we're delivering and how do we deliver it and can we do it any differently. So that will be, or a tool. Yep.
All right, thank you, Paul. That's been good. I look forward to getting into some of the stuff with after there's a bit more scrutiny of it and to make some decisions. There's no silver bullets, but it's us pulling the trigger. So,
Kia ora, everyone. I feel like that's big shoes to fill. And I also feel a little bit hungry after seeing all that beautiful food as well. You'll be pleased to know that I only have one slide today, so we will keep this really, really quick. So the aim of this presentation, and if you want to call it that, this one slide, is to give you a really quick update as to the plan of attack, the comms approach for comms and engagement with regards to the long-term plan. So planning is currently in development, but it's important that I flag with you where we're at, so that you know that comms and engagement hasn't been forgotten about, but also for some of our new councillors around the table, this is a bit of a quick update as to how this is going to roll. So there won't be a full comms and engagement strategy to present to you today. That will come. We've kind of deliberately held that space so that we could have those conversations that you had around the table today. And over the coming weeks, we will be refining our approach to comms and engagement and bringing that back to you. So what is this afternoon about? I've put together a bit of a comms pathway, which outlines basically what the plan is between now and the end of the year, using a phased approach to community conversations to kind of give you a bit of a sense of what our plan might look like. So June, July, the aim is to test and lock in the communications strategy for the long-term plan. The goal being to make sure that we're all really aligned in the what, the why, and the how we're actually going to talk to our communities before we start doing the talking. And just to remind you now as well, this is very much your communications and engagement approach. The communications team and myself are here to guide you and support you with everything you need, but ultimately this is your communications and engagement approach. So between now and mid-June, I'll start kind of shaping up a bit of a comms and engagement strategy, and then I'll be coming to you on the 17th to test that approach, that recommended approach, and kind of sense check that with you. This will include how we'll potentially run community conversations between now and the end of the year, how far we go, what we test, and what those conversations are going to be. And then in July, I'll be looking for that endorsement from you. And from here, this will be your strategy to own. So at this stage, you'll see that we've got pre-engagement conversations kind of penciled in for around September. And this is when we'll potentially go out to our communities and get a real understanding of what's important to them in the current environment. Now, the timing of those September conversations, if that's what we choose to do, that's quite deliberate. Because not only does it allow us to have a bit of a sense of what our communities are wanting before we start to draft the long-term plan pre-Christmas, but also at the same time, in September, we're going out for formal consultation on the Waters CCO. So there is the potential that we could bundle those things together. Obviously, the Water CCO is going to have a direct effect on our long-term plan. So there could be some efficiencies to be gained by bundling it up, having those conversations. Keeping in mind, any pre-engagement is usually informal consultation. However, there's nothing to say we can't bundle that into the formal consultation that we need to have for the Waters CCO. Following those potential conversations, we did come back to you in October in a very kind of light touch. This is what we've heard from our communities, and we'd also do that publicly as well, and let our communities know that, hey, look, we're tying the bow on this. This is what we've heard from you. We're now going to go away and prepare our draft LTP. And then between that closing the loop, this is what we heard, and the end of the year, we'll draft our consultation document and prepare our formal consultation campaign. And that will be going out in March of next year. By then, we will have tested our priorities, tested our story, and hopefully have a reasonably good handle on exactly what is important to our communities, which means there'll be no surprises. And to Councillor Immink's point earlier in the day, by then, whilst our communities may or may not agree with some decisions that are made or where the priorities land, at least they will understand the why, providing we take them along for the journey. So the intention is to be really, really deliberate, test early with our communities, no surprises approach, so that our communities really understand what it is that's being proposed. So yeah, in a nutshell, as I said, short and sweet, that's the pathway in terms of our comms between now and in March next year. Keeping in mind over the next few weeks, I'll be building that comms and engagement strategy. So if there is anything really hot topic, top of mind for you that you want included within that strategy, by all means, I welcome you to ask any questions or provide any feedback now. Or if you think about it later on, you're more than welcome to email me as well. So, over to you.
Councillors? Tony?
Just also mindful too in the lead up and that, and how, the narrative will be and with the public, because it's the election will be building up towards that as well. And so that's going to have a great impact on what information or how loud our comms can be at the time, or whether or not some of the stuff we're putting out might be used as fuel during that time. So just mindful of that kind of consideration of that election, general election stuff happening in the public.
Noted. Thank you, Councillor Boynton.
I had a couple of comments. One was around, I think, the idea of bundling the conversations around water with some pre-engagement has some merit, but just being really careful because people get really confused when there's too many things going on. So just being, I'm sure you've got some great ideas how to do that, but that would be my caution about that. And the other one was around, I like the kind of extended process that we use to get a lot of feedback, and again, just making sure that when those final reports come to council with this is what we got through the formal engagement, that other stuff's really visible in there as well, because often people will contribute once, they've done their bit, they're not going to contribute again, and so I'm just thinking about with the Rex Morpeth. I think there's a lot of pre-engagement, and then in the final kind of consultation around it for the LTP, that some of that early stuff got a bit lost, and so what was visible was the last minute quite hostile stuff, and some of the really positive stuff that had come earlier didn't really come through. So just being mindful that we capture that as it comes through as well. Yeah, those are my only comments. Leslie?
Thanks. Hi Liz, good afternoon. I know that like the Awakeri strategy group or advisory group seems to be like it's working really well. And we've talked before in the past about citizens groups, and have we thought any further about getting some community citizens group to give some consistent sort of feedback throughout the whole process?
Yes, we have considered that. We recently met with a council who has done this particularly well. And whilst it is a really, really good idea, run accurately and successfully, they are extremely expensive to put together. Noting that every community member that is on that people's panel is also paid to be on that panel. But there are other things that we can also do, key focus groups, etc. And just noting, Lainey has her hand up too.
Oh, thank you. Lainey?
Thank you for the question, Leslie. That's it's really nice to revisit that, and that also connects obviously to what Manandal said previously around making sure that we get a representative cross-section of feedback. What I think we'd like to do, and obviously Liz will build this into her strategy, is work with existing groups like the Youth Council really strongly, and also possibly, as you may remember, we had the Climate Change Steering Group reviewing the climate pathway last time in parallel with the LTP. So there are kind of special interest groups that are already existing that we'd like to work with rather than sort of design something from scratch.
Thank you.
Thank you. It would seem that that's the comments for now. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Great, good work. Between Hone and Lainey, we're going to go till past. We've got 20 minutes to cover mana whakahono arohe and or the heritage hikoi. Anything we don't cover will come back tomorrow. Do you have a recommendation as to which is the best one to do next? That we can definitely do within 20 minutes? Okay. Okay. Let's do that. Thank you.
Oh, Lady might have
I'd love it if you would do yours, Hone, because then I can be in the room throughout mine tomorrow. But if your team aren't ready, then I'm also aware that I might annoy my team by saying that.
Sorry, your mic wasn't on.
Well, if we do it quickly, we might come back to you as well, Lainey.
I'll be in the car on the way to the theatre, but that's fine because I don't have much to say anyway.
I'm coming to see you tonight.
Oh, yay.
I was in Matilda.
Are you going tonight?
Yeah. Welcome, Donna. And Haimona at the back there.
So, I'll take it as read, and we've approved that. Fantastic. Tēnā koutou e te koromātua me nā kai konahera. Ko ro te rā, nō reira ngā mihi kia koutou katoa I tēnei ahi kia kaha. We've got this. Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a big day and a long day, so I applaud you for what you've been doing today. I'm pleased today to be presenting on our second mana whakahono arohe agreement, and this one being between Whakatane District Council and Te Runanga o Ngati Whare. This builds on the work that we've already started through our first agreement and continues the work that Council and iwi are undertaking to formalise how we work across the district. I do plan to keep today's presentation relatively concise, recognising that many councillors will already be familiar with the broader context of the mana whakahono arohe following previous presentations. However, at the same time, I also want to acknowledge our newer councillors, Jessie, Malcolm and Carolyn, and ensure there is enough context throughout the presentation to support understanding of both the purpose of mana whakahono arohe and Council's role within these agreements. So before we begin, I'd just like to note that the draft agreement before you today follows the same short form agreement that was previously approved and signed by Council with Te Runanga o Ngati Manawa. I also acknowledge that the Te Runanga o Ngati Whare Board has formally approved the draft agreement and supports the progressing the relationship framework with Council. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge and thank councillors for the ongoing support and engagement on this kaupapa across both the previous and current triennium. Okay. So let's get into it. And again, apologies if it's a little bit of a repeat. I'll try go as quickly as I can. So at its core, mana whakahono arohe is really a formal relationship and process agreement. It basically just sets out clearer and more consistent ways for Council and iwi to work alongside each other within the existing legislative framework. Importantly, it's focused on engagement and process, not property ownership, financial commitments or transferring governance powers. This agreement is legally recognised, but it is also intentionally flexible and reviewable. So in simple terms, it sets out how we work together, how we support each other, and how we work through things if we get a little horeha with each other. It's also important to reinforce that this agreement does not transfer Council's governance or statutory decision-making authority. The draft agreement takes a practical and flexible approach, particularly while the legislation is still changing, and it allows us to adapt as the future framework becomes clearer. So the process, what is the process and what is our legal obligation? So once an iwi authority initiates a mana whakahono Rohe process, the council has a statutory obligation under the RMA to engage in good faith and work towards reaching an agreement. While the legislation requires us to enter into discussions, the actual content of the agreement is negotiated between the parties and remains flexible and reviewable. So the overall purpose is to create clear and agreed ways of engaging that support collaboration, transparency, and more efficient processes. Importantly, the agreement does not create entirely new obligations. I think it's important to note. It just largely formalises and clarifies our engagement, responsibilities, and relationships that already exist under current legislation and practice. So ultimately, this is about creating greater certainty and consistency around processes that are already happening. So what are the benefits? Look, the strongest recurring theme in these agreements is clarity and certainty for all parties. So for community, the benefits are around transparency, consistency, and more efficient engagement process. Earlier engagement and clearer expectations can reduce misunderstandings and help avoid delays later in projects, which in turn reduces costs. For iwi and hapu, the agreements formalise our relationships and establish agreed ways of engaging with council that endures. And for council, the benefits are operational as much as relational. They create continuity beyond individual staff, elected members, or leadership changes. And the relationship sits between the organisations rather than depending on personalities. So to give you some current context, we do have a mana whakahono with Ngati Hokopu, which was initiated in November 2023. There have been several meetings and iterations of the agreement created, and currently the draft has been returned to Ngati Hokopu Hapu for review. With Te Runanga o Ngati Manawa, we finalised an agreement in November 2025. Te Runanga o Ngati Whare initiated in November 2025, which is one that I'm bringing today. Te Mana o Ngati Rangatihi initiated this year in January, and we are currently in negotiations with them. And Te Runanga o Ngati Awa have shown interest, but we have no formal request at this point. Bay of Plenty Regional Council has several short-form agreements in place currently. Sorry. So I will take it that the short-form agreement has been reviewed, that was provided. I just wanted to provide some further reassurance around the intent and approach of these agreements. It's intentional that it's a pragmatic and modest short-form approach during this period of legislative uncertainty. They are intentionally principle-based, so they're not highly prescriptive, and they're designed to be reviewed once the legislation comes through and becomes clearer. Okay, Okay, so the financial and resource implications. We recognise that councillors will naturally have questions around the costs and resourcing. Like any relationship framework, there is an investment of time and effort required from all parties, but the intent is to reduce uncertainty, duplication, and reactive engagement over the longer term. So to date, this work has been managed within existing staff responsibilities and core duties, and the expectation is that stronger upfront relationships and clearer engagement pathways will improve efficiency over time. rather than create significant additional cost. The outcome that we are seeking today is for council for council approval to enter into a mana whakahono Rohe agreement with Te Runanga o Ngati Whare, and this will come back for approval at the council meeting on 25th of June. As said, it basically just formalises how council and iwi work together in a transparent and consistent way, creates continuity beyond individual people or election cycles, and provides a flexible foundation during a period of legislative uncertainty, while fully retaining council's statutory decision-making responsibilities. And that's me. Yes.
Give you a medal, well done, but that's not my question.
That was pretty good, 4 minutes or something.
Very well, you didn't go too fast, it was nice. Just look, on the previous slide, the fourth bullet point, where you're talking about current staffing capacity, is that still going to apply if we were fortunate enough to enter into more agreements?
Yes, I absolutely think it will. Yeah,
capacity?
it makes it easier. It makes it way more transparent, and we know how each other are working, and we've got something to refer through to.
Cool.
Carolyn?
I know that, thanks Donna, I know with the RMA reform, we once that, I'm not too sure the timeframes, but we're not allowed or prescribed to do new mana whakahono orohi agreements after a certain time frame. Is that still stands?
Yes, it does, and it's once the legislation has actually come into effect, there is an expectation that it will be removed. It hasn't been confirmed that it will be removed, but there's an expectation that it will be removed.
Okay. So my second question is just, I'm sure you've obviously been having these conversations with all our iwi, and they've had ample opportunity to initiate mana whakahono orohi for their other iwi? Yeah. Cool.
Yes.
Right. Just with the timeframes, I didn't want, you're well aware.
Tony?
Just a big mahi to all you guys and your mahi to be able to come this through, because I realise there is that deadline. When is that deadline? Because our iwi can initiate by getting in contact. Is there a cut-off for that? What is that cut-off?
There isn't an official cut-off. There was, my understanding was that it was 30th of June, but because the actual legislation hasn't passed yet, nothing changes until the legislation has passed. David?
Yeah, and that's correct. And I think the latest timing for the new Planning Act is likely to be August, September. So there is still a window. Yep.
Thank you.
Two? Sorry.
Just for those who initiate, is there a time frame over initiation and actually setting it in stone? I mean, if you're taking too long and you haven't actually setting is it going to cost council any more waiting for people to initiate to finish? Yeah.
I don't envision that there's additional costs. There's, apart from obviously additional meetings to be able to continue the conversation. I'm not too sure if there is a cut-off period, not that I'm aware of. David, do you know?
They've got that 18 months, and you can extend it upon mutual agreement. Yeah, and which we have done with Hokapu, and the legislation was changed. Hapu that was able to initiate a mana whakahono, and now only iwi are allowed to.
Okay, right. Thank you for that.
Further questions or comments? Sounds like there's broad support. Thank you very much. Great piece of work. It's nice to have another one of these to formalise, so thank you.
No, thank you, everybody.
Yeah. So, councillors, that brings us to the end of our session. We'll talk about the Heritage Hekoi tomorrow, following the wānanga, I guess, on waste. And so that brings us to a close. Tu, could I ask you to close us with karakia?
I roto i tēnā i tēnō mātou kia maha ai tu hua ma ke hiki. Toi te kupu, toi te mana, kia toi ngā tikanga koe ia te whakahiri hea, he whakawātea. Au me e hui e.
Thank you, everyone.